Everything happened so suddenly that no one even had time to realize how it could all end. All the residents, on their knees, begged to be rid of the terrible monster once and for all. They knew that no one could handle him better than the legendary swordswoman. The girl thought it was cruel, but she saw that the monster would not stop until it destroyed everything around it. She saw the fear in the eyes of the residents, who could die from a fiery attack at any moment. So the girl realized that she had no other choice and would have to destroy the monster and save the people. It was at this moment that she suddenly remembered everything, her past life and that fateful day of death. When the girl descended, as expected, the villagers began to loudly praise and glorify her. She entered the world of a book that told the story of the legendary sword, which she had read with enthusiasm in a past life. In this story, she played an important role. She was the strongest swordswoman, Astria. However, people noticed that the holy swordswoman had changed a lot recently, and this was discussed lively. Astria, sitting nearby, heard gossip about herself, saying she had become too mercantile. She knew her fate and understood that it was necessary, because she was no longer the naive girl she once was. She was once called a humble holy swordswoman for her selfless help to others for the sake of a cause. And whenever monsters attacked or robbers attacked, people immediately turned to her for help. But now that her memory had returned, Astria no longer wanted to live like this, and she had reasons for it. In her past life, she constantly lived without money and was forced to survive in poverty. But this did not mean at all that she was ready to repeat this path in her new life. An employee of the establishment, upon seeing Astria, offered her dinner, but she politely refused. Entering the room, she felt a strange dissonance and devastation from the two lives she had lived. She even tried to drown out these feelings by shopping, but, to be honest, it was so-so. Falling tiredly onto the sofa, Astria thought that even this kind of life was starting to bore her. Although her past, full of violence in a dysfunctional family, was even more difficult. She didn't understand why these memories had come back, but they were as vivid as if they had happened yesterday. Astrea tried to cheer herself up with the thought that at least that time her mother had remained unharmed. Shaking her head, she tried to drive away useless thoughts that always brought only sadness. Now, having surpassed human limits, she had plenty of both time and money, which was quite unusual. Trying on the outfit, she smiled. She was on top form as always, although sometimes she just wanted peace. In the evening, alone, Astria decided to go on a short hike to clear her mind. She had no idea who she would meet there. When she came out, she saw a giant holding a boy. The girl, hearing the noise, came closer and didn't understand why she couldn't just walk past. She, of course, took the sword with her, although she really didn't want to use it, at least not at first. But the bullying of the boy suddenly reminded her of painful memories of her own father's cruelty. The girl didn't want to interfere, because she had already mistakenly saved the villains once, but she tried not to get involved in matters that didn't concern her. But she decided that the rules of mercy definitely should not apply to these men. The men, not even knowing who was in front of them, brazenly began to threaten her with violence. The girl understood that she couldn't kill them, so she wasn't even going to draw her sword. As expected of a holy swordswoman, Astria quickly scattered them in a matter of minutes. The boy, forgetting about his fear, was already looking at her with admiration, as if at a true legend. But the men, although beaten, were still moving and trying to get to the defenseless boy. Noticing this, the girl thought for a moment that perhaps they should simply be destroyed. She probably would have done so if one of them hadn't screamed, calling the boy a family of evil. After all, she is not actually the main character of the story, but only the mentor of the future hero. She is the one who should teach him the sword and push him to swear revenge on the evil god and then simply disappear. And the one who will ultimately take her life is the reincarnation of an evil god, who was called the family of evil. And looking at the boy, Astria would never have thought that she was facing such a terrible incarnation. After all, according to the plot, it is this cute guy who will one day take her life without hesitation. In the world of the legendary sword, there are two gods created by the original creator of this world. The light god of the beginning was Shiner, and the dark god of the beginning was Cashin, who held the balance. But one day, a dark god upset this fragile balance, and the world began to change. After a long and fierce battle, the dark god won, and the light god suffered a crushing defeat. As the sun faded, giving way to eternal night, hope emerged, a small seed of hope. King Azazel and four heroes, Ria's ancestors, became those who rose against the darkness. By joining forces, they were able to defeat the evil god and restore light to the world. But they overlooked one important fact that was beyond their control. The evil god is capable of being reborn again and again, going through an endless cycle of rebirth. Then the girl quickly realized that this boy was a new incarnation of the same god. So before acting, Astria decided to check if there was any evidence of this truth. The man shouted that the boy had run away from the foster father who had raised him, and this was just the beginning. But the girl was not interested in this. She was more concerned about the sign that was supposed to reveal her true identity. Seeing the doubt and fear on the man's face, the girl realized that he wanted to kill the boy without any evidence. Astria also noted that the church was unlikely to pay compensation for such a senseless act. King Azazel left a message stating that the reincarnation of an evil god, born in a certain year, according to the Canaanite calendar, would bring destruction to the world. Because of this, children born during that period were often persecuted, as if they were witches for no reason. The girl sincerely felt sorry for these children, because even in their dreams, they could not understand that they were born evil gods. Therefore, addressing the boy, she introduced herself as the holy swordswoman Astria. But the boy was in no hurry to give his name, not understanding why the girl needed it. Looking at his behavior, she realized that he was cute on the outside, but prickly on the inside, like a hedgehog. The girl threatened him that if he did not tell her his name, she would call him Little, and he introduced himself as Sigrian. Hearing the name, the girl apologized because she was going to look at his back, even though he didn't want to. It is difficult for ordinary people to find evidence of the presence of an evil god, because he is extremely cunning and skillfully hides. But Astria was an extraordinary person, able to see the truth and hidden clues through her gift of reason. This gift allowed her to see the essence of all creation and notice signs of an evil god among people and events. Convinced that the man was right, the girl stepped back, keeping a careful distance. And even knowing that he would one day take her life, she still decided to take him with her. Astrea, who had previously refused to eat dinner, asked the maid to cook something for the boy. After a while, Sigrian ate greedily because he was very hungry, and the girl watched him carefully. As she watched, she realized that she had brought him impulsively, and now she didn't know what to do with him next. After all, the end of the legendary sword predicted that half the world would be destroyed, and the main character and Sigrian would die from each other. But she couldn't just sit back and watch the world she had long protected disappear. Or rather, Astria had been defending it for 100 years, waging a grueling struggle without respite. During this struggle, she lost many people dear to her, and it hurt every day. But she was somewhat reassured by the fact that now the power of the evil god was sealed and could not act. However, there were two ways to awaken his power, and both were deadly. The first was to purify his internal chi, the second was to kill him, leaving no chance of rebirth. She heard the boy's story that he had run away from his adoptive father, who beat him every day, and promised to behave differently. Sigrian also noted that he was good at cleaning and cooking, and asked her, with tears in her eyes, to take him with her. The boy's life reminded her of her own past, and she too begged her mother not to leave her alone. So, despite the danger, she decided to help him and take the risk. But in the end, Astria asked again if the boy would really follow all her orders without hesitation. The boy, who was held back by no one and nothing in the world, was ready to do anything to survive. Having missed the moment when he was swallowed by the evil god in the original story, the girl decided to keep him with her. The boy didn't like how she treated him like a child, but he still wanted to stay. The girl knew that there was no other way out, so she decided to teach him so that he would not go astray. Tired after the day's events, they went to bed, and since there was only one bed, the boy slept next to her. None of them suspected that an evil god would wake up at night and begin to control his body. During the day, he couldn't control himself, and he couldn't stop the boy from staying with the girl who was annoying him. Now there was nothing to stop him from taking her life, and the thought seriously occupied his mind. Suddenly, Astria abruptly got out of bed, and the boy already thought that she had noticed his energy. He soon realized that the girl suffered from sleepwalking and was talking in her sleep without suspecting it. The boy breathed a sigh of relief, thinking that he hadn't been discovered, but he still believed that she wouldn't be able to stop him. Using his dark powers, he ordered her to fall into a deep sleep so he could continue his plans. Sigrian had only recovered a tenth of his strength and had to spend it carefully so that Shiner wouldn't notice. Suddenly, the boy noticed that the girl had ignored the order and continued to mumble in her sleep. When he heard her begging her mother not to leave her, Sigrian finally understood the reason for her condition. It turned out that the Holy Swordswoman's soul was weakened to the point that she was tormented by demons and dark energy. The source of life force is ether, which gives life to all living things, and black ether gives rise to evil. This black ether was his power. The evil dark aura emanated from the Holy Swordswoman. Realizing this, Sigrian was delighted, for she seemed like the perfect victim, as if prepared especially for him. Approaching Astria, he intended to use her to regain his own strength and power. He planned to use her to the fullest, and when he regained his strength, he would not hesitate to take her life. But the plans were not destined to come true. Dawn was coming, and with it, his power was rapidly weakening. Unable to control his body, he fell asleep next to the girl, resting his head on her hand. It was obvious that upon waking up, the boy didn't understand why he was in bed with her so early. Sigrian remembered how he had insisted so much last night not to sleep in the same bed with her, and so he was surprised. The girl also didn't want to sleep on the floor, because she was over 100 years old, and she knew that a bed was better for her. She explained that at his age, he should sleep well, eat healthily, and grow strong and healthy. Astrea assured the boy that she would definitely take care of him and give him everything he needed to grow. Tears appeared in the boy's eyes, because no one had ever cared about him so sincerely and caringly before. But it still annoyed him that she still addressed him as if he were a little boy, even though he was already 12. The girl, who had always thought he was 10 years old, turned on her math skills and started counting. Having been convinced by his words, she had no choice but to calm down. He would forever be a baby to her. After that, Astria began to explain that, even though he was 12, he didn't know how to behave and respect his elders. In addition, she ordered him to go to bed, threatening that otherwise he would stop growing and becoming stronger. Although he didn't want to, the boy obeyed, and promised that when he grew up, he would be much taller and stronger than her. Soon, falling asleep again in the same bed, he felt ashamed of his own helplessness and mixed feelings. Immediately after him, the girl woke up, who hadn't slept so well in a long time, until the boy could look her in the eyes. Soon she noticed how strangely the boy was looking at her, and smiled slightly, hiding her surprise. Immediately, Astria decided to take the boy's upbringing into her own hands, explaining that she should be contacted by you. When Sigrian showed reluctance to do so, the girl shortened the name, knowing that he didn't like it. A little jokingly, the boy immediately noticed that she should be called his Sion, otherwise he would not respond to the name. As soon as she reminded him to speak in V, he noticed how his expression changed, and he blushed. Astria explained that to live in this world, you need to learn etiquette. It's the only way to become a good person. Noticing that if he spoke in the U language, she didn't have time to finish when she suddenly felt a familiar aura. Quickly getting out of bed, Astria felt a rather familiar aura that made her heart beat faster. She didn't even hear the boy's question, asking why he had to say that, since they were almost the same age. Ignoring the boy, the girl quickly gathered herself and hurried to leave the room, not wanting to slow down. Astrea immediately closed the door, preventing the boy from leaving with her, keeping the situation under control. After all, she knew he would try to escape, so she closed the door from the outside, leaving him inside. Cian immediately remembered her reproach that, despite his age, he still didn't know etiquette, and he cooled down a little. Immediately after that, fear appeared on his face, because he assumed that the girl's actions were due to his dislike. He knocked on the door with all his might, promising not to be rude again, just so she wouldn't leave him alone. Meanwhile, the person Ray had called was calmly drinking tea, as if completely oblivious to anything around him. Within seconds, Ray appeared in front of him, arriving surprisingly quickly, as if appearing out of thin air. Saphir seemed to be mocking, smiling, and taking his time to explain the purpose of his challenge. Playing with the girl, Astria, who had left the child alone, had no intention of playing with him, and said she would leave if he had nothing to say. But soon she had to delay, because Saphir told her news concerning the evil god and his plans. As it turned out, standing before the girl was Saphir, none other than the successor of the good god, with a sparkle in his eyes. Besides, he was the current Saint King, But despite his beauty, his true essence was different. The girl had long since realized that he was cunning and treacherous, and each time she became more and more convinced of this. Astria would not have thought of forming an alliance with him if it had not turned out that their interests coincided. Still, she decided to listen to him and sat down opposite him, not next to him as he had hoped. The man seemed to enjoy playing with her, and he still hadn't gotten to the topic of their meeting. However, she eventually learned that in 4 years, a new star would rise in the eastern sky. This star will become a hero, born under the protection of a good god. Noticing that she was the holy swordswoman Astria, he said that she should become his mentor. After completing the mission, he said, at the hands of an evil god, she was to receive eternal peace. The girl felt it in her heart, and after talking to Saphir, she was convinced that today was that day, the day she will be told of her destined fate, from which there is no retreat or way back. Astria, seemingly indifferent, reacted to his words, deciding that it wasn't that important, and hurried to leave. However, she guessed that her husband was not going to let her go so quickly. He wanted to give her a blessing. Saphir believed that even if her fate was sealed, she could pray for help. He believed that, having accepted the blessing, the good god would do everything possible to protect her life. Astria remembered that according to the plot, the good god could not find the incarnation of the evil god due to the absolute law of causality. All the good god could know about the incarnation was the year of birth, because even a good god has his limits. In addition, the blessing is valid only during the mission and does not extend to other moments of life. When she transfers all the knowledge and skills to the hero, the blessing will immediately disappear. True, Saphir was unaware of the existence of the original, and would hardly have suggested it knowing the truth. Astria, who knew the original, was quick to decline the offer, believing that she could handle the mission herself. Besides, if she acted carelessly, Cian could be exposed, which would further complicate the plans. However, even this time the man did not let go of her. She noticed his emotional tension today. Yet she soon managed to escape from his arms and hurried back to Cian, to whom she explained nothing. She tried to calm herself down, remembering that she had left the magic circle behind, so the boy couldn't get outside. However, Astria did not expect to see what she did see, and it made her heart sink. Upon entering, she immediately noticed that all her belongings were scattered, as if the room had been through a storm. Amidst the chaos, she didn't immediately notice a boy hiding in a corner, crying quietly. Astria immediately saw that all of his hands were covered in scratches and abrasions, traces of his suffering. However, the boy seemed indifferent, and as soon as the girl approached, he immediately hugged her, seeking protection. Continuing to hug her, he admitted that the door wouldn't open, and he was almost going crazy with fear. Furthermore, Sigrian believed that she left because of his disobedience, and feared that he had still done something wrong. The girl realized that he had made a fuss for the same strange reason. She remembered a conversation with Saphir, who suggested that the embodiment of evil might be approaching, and he noted that if she encountered evil, she should be careful and not succumb to its spells. Astria herself felt the truth of his words and could not deny them, because she had brought Cian. She couldn't push away the little hand that reminded her of her childhood, because that would be cruel of her. Continuing to hug him, the girl apologized for leaving without an explanation. She created a magic circle so he couldn't get out. She wanted to protect him. Astria, ready to follow her destiny from the very beginning, promised that she would never leave him. She was ready to do everything to prevent evil from taking hold of him, and even to protect him every minute. After this situation, the boy began to address her as you, which surprised him. The place wasn't very comfortable, so the girl asked if he liked the sea or the mountains better. It suddenly occurred to her that appropriate conditions were needed for the proper upbringing of a boy. Cian had never thought about it, so it was difficult for him to answer such a question. As expected, she realized that he liked deserted places, because his childhood influenced his choice. After a long series of questions, the girl boldly bought the house, almost ignoring one detail. All criteria are met. A house in the middle of a lake, no people, a boat, and everything is deserted. Remembering the words of the girl who was selling the house where the laboratory had been, where it had once been quiet and wonderful, she understood why it was so cheap. Grabbing her head, Astria began to threaten that she would definitely remind Jenny about this. Even a boy who lived in not the best conditions did not understand how it was possible to live like this. He didn't like that it wasn't cleaned. There was no furniture or dishes. although the other criteria didn't seem to bother him. The girl smiled, mentally calling the guy a little ungrateful, because finding this house turned out to be not as easy as it seemed at first. Astria might have said it directly if she hadn't noticed his obvious nervousness and embarrassment, which betrayed him with his head. She quickly realized that he was afraid she would suddenly change her mind because of his dissatisfaction with the condition of the house or its appearance. Patting him lightly on the head, she reassuringly said that the furniture and dishes could be purchased later without any problems. If you look closely, it didn't look so bad. After all, this was their home, where they would live together. The guy, who had previously doubted, suddenly appreciated the sincerity of her words, because no one had ever cared so much for him. Now he looked at the house in a completely different way, feeling a warmth inside, as if this place had already become truly familiar to him. Astria, as always, admired his appearance, gently running her hand through his hair and smiling faintly. Sigrian tried to hide his enjoyment of it, but his reactions constantly unintentionally betrayed his true feelings. The girl decided that she didn't understand everything about modern youth, because for her, 12 years old was still a real childhood. Meanwhile, Cyan hurried home to start cleaning the rooms as soon as possible and restoring proper order there. In the end, through joint effort, they managed to cope, and the house gradually acquired a neat and well-groomed appearance. In the evening, the girl was already feeling very tired, because she had cleaned 5 rooms herself, bringing them to an almost perfect condition. To take a break, she suggested that the guy look at the furniture and dishes needed to furnish the house together. Seeing the surprise on his face, Astrid explained that this was her pocket space, and all she needed to do was know the correct keyword. The girl was frankly proud of this little trick, being certain that the guy had hardly seen anything like it before. She reassured him, adding that these were far from all of her secrets, so it was too early for him to be completely surprised. As her next trick, she decided to demonstrate teleportation, the magic of instantaneous movement that amazed even experienced magicians. Within seconds, they found themselves in an unfamiliar place, where passers-by froze in surprise, not expecting them to appear out of nowhere. Astrea explained that this was a shopping street where she often came when she was the daughter of the Marquise. While the people around them were surprised by their appearance, she quietly asked the boy to stay close and not go far. The boy wanted to say something, but quickly realized it was useless, so he decided to watch silently and wait. Suddenly, the other children noticed the Holy Swordswoman and, without hesitation, began to call her pretty aunt, which even sounded a little funny. They were curious to know what kind of magic she could use, noticing that she had literally appeared out of thin air. The boy, who was holding her hand tightly, suddenly felt that she had let go of him, and this confused him for a moment. The situation looked funny, but at the same time he felt a slight jealousy, watching how she interacted with the other children. So Xian quickly walked over and carefully picked the girl up, reminding her of their time constraints and the importance of moving on. She agreed with his words, although she barely managed to walk alongside him, slightly lagging behind his confident stride. They decided to find new clothes for the boy, who had almost no proper clothes, and together they began choosing and trying on things. No matter what clothes he tried on, the girl could not help but admire him, because his appearance seemed surprisingly attractive to her. However, he had no idea that the worst was yet to come, with pajamas waiting ahead, lavishly decorated with a bunch of bows. In addition to clothes, they visited a furniture store and placed an order to furnish their new home comfortably and cozy. Sigrian was not entirely pleased, noticing that the dishes were not very durable, but the girl decided not to worry about these trifles. Soon they were about to go get groceries when Astria was suddenly called right in the middle of the street. These were men who wanted to play a game with her, which they thought would be very interesting, although it looked dubious. The Holy Swordswoman did not understand why, wherever she went, she constantly encountered such scum, as if she were attracted by a magnet. But the biggest surprise for her was the boy's behavior, who frankly didn't like the attitude of those men. She felt a familiar aura from him and noticed how his gaze changed, becoming much more serious and colder. This did not go unnoticed by the men, who immediately lost their former confidence and no longer looked so determined. At that time, Astria tried to understand why the awakening had come so suddenly and unexpectedly, even for her. As she continued to look at him, she felt that the situation could still be stopped, and this thought calmed her a little. Coming closer, she quietly remarked that it was not worth thinking about such dangerous things, lest we invite trouble. To her surprise, just her voice was enough for Xian to instantly come to his senses and return to his usual state. The girl, who was quite nervous herself, felt a sudden relief, which turned into a pleasant inner peace. Only later did she realize that it all started because of those scoundrels, and she couldn't help but loudly accuse them of it. Finally, after all the shopping, the girl set about preparing dinner, hoping to impress with her skills. She herself saw that the dish looked so bad that it would probably be better not to taste it at all. She was already beginning to regret promising Sigrian dinner, as her culinary skills left much to be desired. After all, she didn't know how to cook at all, and even her subordinates once asked her not to experiment with the kitchen in order to avoid unpleasant adventures. Astrea sincerely believed that if the book was written simply, then everything would work out for her. So she was already thinking about ordering a ready-made dinner. But she didn't have time to do it, because the boy himself came over to see her culinary masterpiece live. She quickly realized that this dinner was unlikely to be salvageable, and quietly asked if it wouldn't be better to order something ready-made. However, Xian disagreed with her doubts and assured her that she could still improve her culinary creation a little with her own hands. What a relief the girl felt when he calmly announced that now he would cook, and all she had to do was set the table. She noticed how skillfully the boy cut and prepared the ingredients, as if he had been doing this not for 1 year, but at least his entire life. As she continued to watch him, she deliberately avoided mentioning the events that had occurred earlier so as not to spoil the moment. After all, the boy was still unaware of the power that lived within him, and any unnecessary mention could frighten him unnecessarily. In addition, Astrea understood that if she started scolding him for attacking the scoundrels, his psyche might not be able to withstand such pressure. So she decided that she had to be there and carefully monitor his every step to prevent something like this from happening again. After some time, the boy finished cooking the dish that the girl had started, and she sincerely praised him for his efforts and the result. While pouring food into bowls, he suddenly asked her height, as if something very important depended on that answer. Learning that she was almost the same height, he assumed a slight difference in age, although she knew full well that she was about 100 years older than him. Suddenly, Astrea felt genuine surprise after tasting the dish he had prepared, and could not contain her emotions. She began to eat quickly, repeating over and over that the dish was incredibly delicious, almost like something from a top restaurant. Her words that any girl who married him would be happy made Cian feel embarrassed and look away. Suddenly, she noticed a small detail. The boy was holding the cutlery the same way she did, as if unconsciously copying her. She enjoyed watching him closely monitor her actions and gradually learn proper table manners. The boy remarked that if she wanted something to eat, she should ask him to cook it for her, because she didn't know how to do it herself. Astrea herself realized that you can't just throw all the ingredients into a pot and call it a full-fledged cooking. Sigrian smiled when the girl took back her words about his cleverness, as if quietly rejoicing in her confusion. Despite everything, he was grateful to her because it was the first time someone had cooked a home-cooked dinner for him. The girl, pleasantly impressed by his words, promised to cook something really delicious next time. But, as might be expected, the boy no longer had much confidence in her culinary abilities and politely refused. That night they slept side by side again, for his bed was not yet ready, and the evil god, as usual, had taken possession of his mind. Cassian was extremely dissatisfied with the clothes the girl had chosen for him, and grumbled quietly under his breath. Trying to take off his pajamas, he couldn't understand why she had chosen such strange clothes for him. If it were up to him, he would have punished her immediately for such an act. But he held back for the sake of his goal. He had felt this before, but now he was finally convinced that she was truly strange and unpredictable in her actions. After all, such an amount of black ether in her heart should have driven a person crazy long ago. But she remained alive and completely adequate. Cassian could have absorbed her energy and alleviated his own condition, but the memories of her behavior forced him to hold back. So he let the demons have fun with her, actually intensifying her nightmares and fears. The demon followed his orders, trying to decide exactly how to help her, whether out of desperation or mild humiliation. But as soon as Cassian heard that he was going to bring her pleasure, his gaze instantly changed and became cold. The demon thought that even if she only pretended to be innocent, she would definitely like his plan. Surprised by himself, Cassian reacted sharply and was about to cast out the demon, but the girl coped with it on her own. Seeing exactly how she got rid of the demon, he was genuinely surprised by her determination and inner strength. This was unusual, because without the contract with the spirit, Astria would not have been able to even notice the demon, but she managed to do it. He, who had thought her defenseless, realized that her five senses were much sharper than he could have imagined from watching her. As soon as the girl was able to focus her gaze, she noticed that the boy was also awake, explaining it as a nightmare. Yawning, she realized that she had had a disturbing dream and even managed to sense the presence of a demon in the room. The boy didn't have time to understand when Estrella abruptly pulled him towards her and gently hugged him, as if trying to calm him down without unnecessary words. Holding him close, she promised to protect him, telling him that the elves had taught her the ways to exorcise demons. When the girl fell asleep, Cassian, although he did not fully believe her words, still dared to partially trust her abilities. He considered her a weak girl who couldn't let go of the past, so it was hard for him to believe in her strength. Carefully wiping the tears from her face, he decided to allow himself to protect her from the good scavenger god he despised. At the same time, he was aware that if he did not prove his usefulness, he might ultimately die at his hands when the right moment came. After a week, they were already used to each other and had breakfast together every morning, like a normal family, without any unnecessary tension. Estrella, as always, enjoyed the taste of the food the guy had prepared, and even allowed herself some light jokes during breakfast. The boy didn't like to talk about how he learned to cook, so he briefly replied that it came naturally. She tried to answer, but missed the point that it all had to do with his adoptive parents and difficult past. Eventually, the girl became curious about how exactly he had become an evil god in the past, but she decided not to ask direct questions. So she cautiously asked what he wanted to do in the future. But Xian paused for a moment, considering his answer. His only desire remained a secret, because he was afraid to openly tell the girl about it. It later turned out that he dreamed of mastering the art of fencing, but was ashamed to admit it even to himself. As might be expected, Astria was genuinely surprised by his unusual desire and looked at him with a slight skeptical note. After all, the evil god from the novel did not use a sword. His power was so destructive that it would destroy everything in its path. He used the sword only once, to humiliate the next holy swordsman, acting coldly and ruthlessly. This particular sword was used only once, in her murder, so it left a tragic mark on her memory. Only now did the girl realize that she was so confused that she couldn't even say a single clear word. Cian noticed how surprised and lost in thought she was as she watched her. The girl was a little afraid of him because his strength exceeded her imagination and caused anxiety. Watching him play from the window, she had no idea what consequences his desire for fencing could lead to. She feared that learning to wield a sword could have dangerous and even horrific consequences, and that thought depressed her. Suddenly, Astria heard the phone ring and picked up the phone in surprise, having no idea who was calling her. As soon as she answered, she immediately regretted it. The voice on the phone was so loud that she almost went deaf. She recognized Hex by the voice, Grand Master of the Two Crowns, whose tone was both majestic and stern. It turned out that he was calling to invite her to have a drink together in a calm, relaxed atmosphere. Hearing this, Astria instantly felt a strong desire to agree and was almost ready to go there right now. But she immediately remembered the responsibility that lay upon her and realized that she could not afford such weakness. She decided to lie, saying that she had quit drinking. But Hex didn't seem to believe her words at all and just smiled. He believed that she would not be able to live without drinking and even asked for an oath on her heart, and this annoyed her. The girl fought the urge to drink and once again firmly said that she had stopped, asking not to forget it. But that wasn't the only news. Astria learned that she would soon have to regain her title of Holy Swordswoman. She learned that the genius Ehrenheier, the son of the Marquise, an aristocrat like herself, had appeared. This news was unexpected because the girl knew this guy well. After all, he was the main character of this novel, and his name aroused curiosity and awe. Speaking of him, he was a shining star born of a good god. The light attracted him. In the original, he was a stubborn, straightforward young man, especially towards his mentor, her. The girl understood that she shouldn't show Hex that she knew him, so she only said that she had heard about him. From the conversation, she learned that it was Hex who wanted to train him, but the boy politely refused. It was completely unexpected for her when Hex asked if she would become his mentor. Meanwhile, Cian was upset, noticing how the girl's face flared up with nervousness. He understood that the Holy Swordswoman did not take just anyone as her student, even though he himself had asked to teach him fencing. So he felt it was a bit impudent of him to ask. It was better to quietly clean and cook. And suddenly, a terrible thought appeared in her head that she would tell him to leave her forever. While thinking, the guy didn't even notice the girl come up and call him. The joyful girl announced that his furniture had finally been delivered, and they could pick it up. On the way home, she noticed that the furniture Cian had chosen was quite simple and unadorned. This made it clear that he didn't like bright or complex patterns at all. She asked Sigrian to wait in the cafe because she needed to leave. But when she saw the expression on his face, she remembered how scared he was when he was left alone. To show how dear he was to her, the girl handed him a precious thing she had with her. It was her mother's bracelet, which always accompanied her and was a memory of the family. She realized that words weren't enough. She needed proof, so she said she would come back when he had the bracelet. This reassured Xian quite a bit, and he happily replied that he would wait patiently for her. So that he wouldn't worry too much, Estrella asked him to stay in the next room, where she would be. Sitting behind the counter, the boy carefully examined the bracelet, holding such a valuable thing for the first time. Along with his admiration, a slight greed awakened in him, because Astria is strong and does not need help. But remembering how she had protected him, he still didn't want to be a burden to her in life. On the one hand, she was the only one who cared about him, and on the other, he didn't want to cause trouble. In the end, he made the right decision, to become stronger and be worthy of her trust. Cian didn't have time to express his thoughts when an unfamiliar voice from the side caught his attention. The stranger asked where he got the bracelet, and the boy immediately felt anxious. Meanwhile, the girl, unsuspecting, remained in the bakery, where the smell of fresh pastries filled the air. She bought some goodies to please the boy and put him in a good mood. As I was about to go to the cafe, I noticed a man who wouldn't let anyone in and looked stern. The man explained that there was a thief in the store right now, and the employees were questioning the intruder. The girl was surprised by the news, and even more so when she learned that someone had stolen the bracelet and the man had made a fuss. Worried that nothing would happen to Cian, she rushed to the coffee shop, ignoring the investigation. As I expected, this really concerned a guy who was distrustful of strangers. Suddenly, Astria noticed a man with a scar who insisted on giving him the bracelet. But as expected, the guy was not going to give away a valuable thing from a person dear to him. Just at this moment, he finally noticed that the girl had run up and appeared on the horizon. Hearing Cian call her name, the man reacted instantly because he knew her very well. Meanwhile, the girl was furious because someone had dared to insult Cian, and it could not go unpunished. Before she could even strike, Hex decided to show his face, as if apologizing. But he did it too late. The girl had already successfully dealt him a hard blow to the face. After a while, with a red face, the man learned that the boy had not stolen the bracelet at all. The girl, a little angry with her friend, kept Cian at a distance because he was unfriendly after the accusation. She began to scold her husband for how a grand master could threaten a child, and loudly explained. The man admitted his mistake, but the question of who he was to her really surprised the girl, because she herself didn't know. Cian also didn't know his status in her eyes, and he was curious to hear the answer. After thinking for a long time, the girl introduced him as her student, maintaining her calmness and authority. Hex was her only friend, to whom she could confide everything without fear of secrets or judgment. When they were warriors, they overcame difficulties together, helped each other, and shared stories. But Cassian is the embodiment of an evil god, and honestly revealing this to Hex could be dangerous. So the girl said that due to circumstances, she had a child with whom she had no connection. The man guessed the details and realized that this was why she had quit drinking, looking at Cian. Hex watched Cian closely, who looked like a small animal. Despite the boy's presence, he began to speak to the girl in a whisper so as not to attract attention. He noted that she didn't need to cook because the food on the street was already tasty and high quality enough. For his words, he immediately received another blow. The girl did not like such advice without permission. While the man was recovering from the blow, Astria stated that he was talking nonsense and had still not apologized to the student. The man, realizing his mistake, apologized to the Holy Swordswoman's disciple, while Cian watched warily. And before Sigrian could respond, the girl advised him not to take this apology seriously. After that, the girl hurried to leave with the boy, leaving her old friend behind, without a word. Finally, the man asked if she had changed her mind about meeting Arnheier. A little surprised, Sion, listening attentively to the conversation, had no idea who was being talked about, but he didn't dare ask directly. Tired and upset, Astria said that they had already discussed this and the conversation was finally over. After all, during the call, she knew for sure that she couldn't take him on as a student because meeting Arnheier was inevitable in years to come. Besides, if she recklessly meets him now, the chaos will only get worse. She said that despite Arnheier's incredible talent, Sion alone is enough for her. While Hex tried to convince her, the girl used teleportation and disappeared home. She herself apologized to the guy for having to deal with his friend. Taking out the plates, Astria said that this was her old friend, whom she had known since childhood. The guy thought she was lying, because otherwise she wouldn't have called him her student in front of her friend. Or maybe she was embarrassed. Putting the plates on the table, she wondered why he hadn't given the bracelet to that scary uncle. Sigrian was surprised, because he had never even thought of giving away a thing that reminded him of the girl's mother. She remarked again how nice it was, but the bracelet had a tracking spell, even though she knew it was best to keep it a secret. When Estrella said to throw him out for safety, the boy smiled. He still wouldn't do it. Meanwhile, taking out the box, Astria suggested that the boys celebrate his birthday together. Sion remembered that a few days ago, while he was reading a book, a girl asked when his birthday was. Before he could answer, she noticed that in addition to cooking, he could read and smiled. Still, she was curious to know when exactly his birthday was, and she didn't back down. Without looking up from his book, Sigrian didn't want to admit that he didn't know exactly when his birthday was. Trying to hide his tears, he asked her not to distract him, but Astria was determined. Sion realized that she had guessed why he was avoiding answering, because he himself did not know how to answer. The girl remarked that as a mentor, he should definitely let her know her birthday. When he asked her what it meant to be a mentor, she rhetorically asked what he thought. She explained that one of her surnames belonged to the family where she was born. The other was bestowed by the emperor when she was appointed a swordswoman. To inherit this surname meant becoming its direct disciple, and this conferred a special connection and honor. At that moment, taking out the sword, she said that she was giving him her last name as a sign of great trust. Despite doubts about the correctness of the decision, Astria looked confident and resolute, without a hint of fear. If Sion learns her swordsmanship, in the distant future, he will be able to change the world beyond recognition. Feeling that she might regret this moment, she still handed him the legendary sword. She explained that the sword's name was Barasilda, and it automatically adapted to each new wielder. Sigrian was impressed by the trust, because to receive such a legendary sword meant earning a great honor. It meant a lot to him, and holding back tears, he immediately hugged the girl, sincerely and warmly. He thought she would leave him, so the unexpected turn of events and tears made him understand her love. The girl also barely held back her tears, repeating that she would never leave him, no matter how difficult the path was. Continuing to hug him, she said that enough crying, it was time to celebrate. After all, the day she adopted him, she decided to do everything she could to make him happy. And if Sion succumbs to the dark force, she will stop him, even if it costs her life. At night, the boy finally went to bed in his room, where there was finally furniture and some comfort. Astria noted that they should go to bed because fencing training starts tomorrow, and it will be a tough day. However, the girl could not help but notice the boy's strange behavior, which betrayed his excitement. She realized that Sion just didn't want to be alone, and the guy was trying to hide it. Not wanting to see her smile, he hid under the covers and said he was going to bed. Astria noticed that since she took him on as a student, he had become more honest and attentive to her words. Wishing him good night, she simply kissed him on the forehead, softly and tenderly. When she was about to go to sleep, his small hand gently stopped her, and the boy kissed her on the cheek, wishing her good night, and her heart trembled a little from it. While the girl was impressed by his tenderness, he quickly hid under the blanket. Funny, but she couldn't deny that she really liked it, and it left a pleasant warmth in her soul. Soon the dark force took control of him again, and Sion came to the girl's room. Cassian already knew that she was going to take him on as an apprentice, although he himself did not really expect it. As he continued to watch, he noticed how she was once again tormented by the memories and horrors of the past. Sitting next to her on the bed, he noticed how easily she opened her heart, even to a ridiculously weak one. While he was talking to the sleeping girl, the demon tried unsuccessfully to get to her. Kissing her hair one last time, Cassian said that he was waiting for her moment of despair. As soon as the boy left the room, the girl immediately opened her eyes and exhaled calmly. Estrella tried to calm down, because pretending like nothing had happened was not easy. It turned out that she had heard all his words from the very beginning and knew that the evil god worked at night. She knew he was using her to regain his power, and when she was no longer needed, he could destroy her. It was even funny for her to listen to his threats, because she turned out to be not as naive as he thought. Astria knew she would never let him deal with her with his own sword, no matter how hard he tried. 3 years had passed since that moment, and now the boy was waking her up, not the other way around, like a small child. He was in a hurry to wake her up, because he was very eager to start training without wasting a single minute. As expected, in 3 years with such a mentor, his skills have significantly improved and strengthened. Astrea didn't want to overpraise him, but she couldn't help but notice that the result was quite good. She thought his skills were incredible and confidently considered him a true genius. In 3 years, thanks to talent and diligence, Xian reached the level of a first-class swordsman. If he continues to learn quickly, he will soon be able to wield even rudimentary qi with a sword. Estrella couldn't help but notice that over the past 3 years, he had grown noticeably and become more aristocratic. She recalled how difficult it was to get rid of his stray cat habits, but the result was impressive. However, one thing remained the same, and she said she was planning a meeting with Hex today. Cian began to resent hearing about the meeting, believing that their meetings were too many. Unable to bear it, the girl reminded him that he should behave politely with his elders, without scandals. Opening the door to the house, she explained that the boy didn't like Hex because of the incident with the bracelet, but she also reminded him that Hex was her friend, and they had known each other for over 100 years, no matter what. And no matter how much he is against it, he cannot prevent them from seeing each other, because friendship is stronger than prohibitions. The guy took her hand and said that although they were old acquaintances, he was closer to her than Hex. And he added that if she was going to go out drinking, he could replace Hex. So he asked her not to go anywhere. Astrea realized that he was being capricious, and there was nothing she could do about his stubborn behavior. Maybe he thought he was an adult. Maybe it was the influence of an evil god, but he always wanted to keep her by his side. And even this time he tried, but the girl gave him a slap, forcing him to admit defeat. Before the boy could react, she hit him on the back, and he fainted instantly. After all, she had a good reason to go every time, but Sean always remained under supervision and safe. Astria also needed to train, just like him, so as not to lose her long-honed skills. She remembered how 3 years ago, when she had vowed to teach him fencing, she had thought of one technique. It was called the Sword of Mind, a technique that exorcises the demon from within, created by her uncle. She planned to teach him this technique until Xian reached a certain high level of skill. But Astria knew that, unfortunately, this technique was not yet complete and needed further improvement. If you give Xian an unfinished Sword of Mind technique, he may not be able to withstand the force and die. Because of this, she had to cover herself with Hex every time. But even in such moments, she cared for him, and after she knocked him out, she put him on the couch. The biggest problem was the slow progress, and Xian could even surpass it on her own. While thinking about this, she didn't notice several giant monsters approaching in front of her. But in reality, these huge monsters were friendly and turned out to be her old friends. It was a real family, a mother ogre, a baby ogre, and a father ogre. Together, they looked harmonious. Seeing the little one hand over the apple, Astria promised to bring something tasty next time, because this time she came empty-handed because of Sion. It was originally a high-level dungeon, most recently home to a two-headed Cyclops boss. Astria quickly put him in his place, showing him how to treat her politely. From that day on, this place became her training ground and a quiet corner for meditation. And the family of ogres began to act as gatekeepers, dealing with insolent trespassers. Even though they were monsters themselves, they were the ones who supported her without hesitation or fear. Meanwhile, Astria began her training while Cian continued to sleep, absorbed in a dark sleep. He had nightmares from which it was impossible to wake up, and there was complete darkness all around. Looking around, he felt a fear he had never felt before in his life. Suddenly, at the very top, he saw a stranger who said he was afraid of his incarnation. Of course, Sigrian was instantly curious about who this mysterious stranger was and what he was up to. But instead of answering, Cassian only moved a finger, and the dark force squeezed Sion, beginning to strangle him. He noted that such brazen behavior would not lead to anything good for himself. Sion realized that a single gesture from the man would be enough to wipe him off the face of the earth. Watching his struggle, the evil god noticed that although the boy was weak, he had too much pride. Suddenly, Astria returned and helped him, and the evil god did not dare to act in her presence. Finally, he drew him to himself, declaring that he was only a sacrifice created for his sake. Sion felt a strange sense of relief, his fear of the creature suddenly melting away, leaving behind a cold calm. Believing that he was definitely not the victim, Sion kicked the evil god away, with a slight challenge in his eyes. However, God remained in place, and the boy was thrown back several meters, as if he had been pushed by an invisible force. Immediately after that, when the sensation of levitation began to subside, the boy woke up in the real world. The first thing Sion saw was the worried face of the girl, who was afraid of overdoing it with force. In order not to scare her, the guy simply said that he had a terrible and disturbing nightmare. When the boy leaned on her shoulder, Astria felt that not a single drop of good aura emanated from him. The boy himself felt only an all-consuming fear, the power of pure evil that awakens human nightmares. And for some reason, his face looked so familiar that it made me feel eerily cold. Lying on her shoulder, Sigrian did not understand who the man was and why he called himself his incarnation. Suddenly, the girl pushed him away and thought he was just kidding, pretending to be sick. The boy reproached her for leaving him alone and going to meet Hex, and the girl was indignant. She noticed that he had been very cheeky lately. He must not care who she was dating. However, the boy was not concerned with her remarks. He was only interested in who she was dealing with instead of him. Gently touching her hair, he reminded her that he was no longer a child, but had grown taller than her. Furthermore, he added that he was no longer the boy she had to worry about before. When Astria heard his order not to meet with Hex or anyone else, she gave him a hard slap. After that, Astria laughed because she realized he was worried about her imaginary meeting with Hex. Reassuring herself, she added that Hex would be very offended if he heard this, because he was a true monogamist. Sion was surprised to learn that he was so faithful that he cherished the memory of his wife even after her death for 80 years. Realizing the absurdity of his behavior towards Hex, who was just a friend, the man felt a little embarrassed. But Ray didn't care at all, grabbing him by the neck and telling him that he had invented the problem himself and got angry. Her anger quickly disappeared, and as she patted his head, she realized that he was very lonely. Therefore, Astria asked him not to forget that she would never leave him and would always be there no matter what. He was very pleased that she wasn't dating anyone until he grew up, because he was the most important thing to her. At such moments, Sigrian behaved like a real child, so he was delighted and immediately approached the girl. As he hugged her, he thought that he still couldn't do as much for her as he wanted to. Hearing his words, Astria waited a moment and thought that he would soon become stronger with the onset of adolescence. Despite the trouble he had caused, she decided the misunderstanding was resolved and offered him a cake. However, the situation was not really resolved yet, as Sion was going to have a calm conversation the next morning. Having prepared a full table of food, he surprised them both, remaining calm, knowing that they were just friends. The same goes for the girl. Hex didn't understand what was happening because he remembered the guy's attitude towards him. He immediately asked Rhea what this lousy boy had prepared for him, and the girl wanted to know too. She remembered how she had found out that evening that Hex was coming to visit, and decided to consult with Sion. And he said that we need to prepare to receive the guest, because he is Rhea's closest friend, and he emphasized the word friend. Realizing that he was not an enemy, Sigrian asked to be told that he could enter without fear. But until now, the man was in no hurry to eat the dish prepared by Sion, suspecting that it might be poisoned. And although the girl was frightened by Sion's attitude towards Hex, now she could stop having tantrums when meeting him, which was even better. In the end, Hex tasted the dish and admitted that it was incredibly delicious, not even expecting it to be so. Finally, he asked Sion where he learned to cook, and he explained that he learned by observing restaurant kitchens. The girl, watching their conversation, noticed that they got along quite well, although she was a little surprised by this. During the conversation, Sian praised his mentor in every way, noting that without her help, he would not have learned to cook. And every time, Astria was surprised at how attractive and sweet Sian was, because she really liked it when he praised her. Taking the boy and scratching his head, Hex noted that he was hiding his teacher's flaws so well, knowing her level of culinary skills. Hex praised him, noting that every boy should know how to cook for his mentor. As he was about to leave, he said goodbye and added that they would see each other tomorrow, which surprised the girl. Hex explained that while she was away, he asked Xian if he could come, and he allowed him. Astria, remembering all his tantrums at the mention of Hex, was surprised by his calm face. This way, he figured that if Hex came, the teacher wouldn't have to go anywhere. She immediately understood the cunning plan to keep her at home and prevent her from going outside. Approaching him, Xian asked if he had behaved well today, like a little student at school. He added that he would definitely cook something delicious for them both tomorrow, and that made her happy. Astria's gaze hinted that she shouldn't do this, as it would prevent her from completing the reception of the Sword of Reason. A few days later, they went out into the city, and he regretted not asking where exactly she wanted to go. Children were running around, trying various treats, and the air was filled with the smell of celebration. When he asked why they were here, the girl smiled in surprise, because she knew that the festival in the village was wonderful. Astria noted that Xian had been working with guests lately, and they hadn't spent time together in a long time. The boy couldn't help but agree, but he still found these activities strange, especially throwing knives to win a toy. While Xian wondered if this was cool, the girl barely held back her laughter, watching his amazement. As soon as he realized she was interested, he left her alone and asked her to wait a moment, smiling. Despite the fact that a second ago he had thought it was foolish, he was going to participate in the game himself. As expected, he managed to win the toy, but instead of a rabbit, he brought a cat. Astria didn't even know what to say, because she wasn't talking about the toy, but about the couple that was in front of them, that had just blossomed, and it was cute. The girl realized that he thought she was fascinated by the toy, even though she was over 100 years old. Seeing her expression, he assumed she didn't like the cat, but was confused. Astria immediately hugged the kitten to her, noticing how soft and beautiful it was, and thanked her. Looking away, the guy dared and still asked her to sleep with him every night shyly. Astria noticed what she wanted and immediately pulled Xian after her, rejoicing at the small victory. The guy, not knowing where it was leading, would never have agreed because he didn't know how to dance very well. But he still liked that it was Ray who taught him how to dance and suggested moves. Xian, having never danced before, listened carefully to how to properly hold and behave on the dance floor. The guy was happy to spend time with her, but he had no idea what plan Ray had actually prepared. He didn't have time to blink when an unfamiliar girl stood in front of him instead of Ray, and his eyes widened. When he returned, he saw a girl who hinted that it was time to change partners, and he understood everything. She told him to take her advice into account to avoid making unpleasant mistakes on the court. Watching Xian stand still, she began to jokingly scold him for not moving. Astria didn't understand why he wasn't dancing, because it was with her that he had previously moved very beautifully to the music. She had arranged all this on purpose because she had realized a few days ago that Xian only wanted to be near her. And I realized that he had a closed nature, and what's worse, he didn't let anyone close to him. Her primary goal was to help him grow up to be a good person, to teach him how to help and socialize. But now, Xian's attention and dispassionate kindness were focused solely on her, which was a little unsettling. So Astria came here today to practice his social skills and observe his reactions. But looking at his behavior, she realized that she had taken it too lightly and underestimated the complexity. Not wanting to see the shame, she suggested that socialization was too early for him, and it could be harmful. Then suddenly, completely unexpectedly, she was asked to dance, and her heart raced a little. Meanwhile, Sigrian didn't know what to do and didn't understand why she had forced him to change his partner. Suddenly, he noticed that she was being invited to dance as well, and he was a little confused, not having time to react. Without wasting a second, he left his partner without explaining anything to her and headed towards Ria. The girl hesitated whether to agree, but she didn't even suspect that everything had already been decided for her without her knowledge. Xian said that he was her only partner for this dance, and there were no other options. Seeing her expression, he realized that she was looking at him and asking with her eyes why he had left his partner. He had already assumed she would say it was none of his business who she danced with, but unexpectedly, Astria decided to play along with him and confirmed that this was her partner for the evening. So she apologized to her husband and wished him a good evening, smiling and blushing a little. As soon as he left, she breathed a sigh of relief, glad that there were no conflicts or scandals. Estrella explained that this man, judging by his manners, was an aristocrat, and he invited her to dance, thinking that she was simple. When he asked if she was also an aristocrat, the girl reminded him that they had come to the festival just to have fun. Indeed, the guy didn't think about how people would react if they found out that an aristocrat was dancing next to them. So she described what could theoretically happen then, and he was a little surprised by her analysis. Astrea noted that the festival only happens once a year, so she just wants to have fun and enjoy the moment. And don't prevent others from also enjoying the holiday, laughing, and making new friends while the music plays. She reminded Sigrian again that on days like these, people usually socialize and can make new friends, so she immediately grabbed his face and scolded him for leaving his partner, reminding him of the rules. Fortunately, everything worked out well. The guy pointed at the girl and said that she had found herself a partner and was having fun. While Astria was surprised at how quickly she had found a new partner, Cian explained that he was bored dancing with her due to frequent mistakes in her movements. Carefully taking her hand, he added with a smile that he wasn't very good at dancing himself, so they were even. Realizing that there was no other choice, Astria smiled and decided that she would have to patiently teach him dances again. As she danced with him, deep down, she suspected that he had said it on purpose to spend more time with her, but she silently accepted the game. At the same time, a celebration was also raging in the banquet hall, although it was much inferior to the atmosphere of the city festivities. As expected, it wasn't as lively and fun there as in the city, where the streets literally breathed with joy. This is exactly what one man thought, who, unable to stand the atmosphere, went out onto the balcony to rest a bit and collect his thoughts. These events were exhausting Ehrenheiter, and he dreamed of being somewhere much more interesting than this all-too-predictable ball. Suddenly, he heard several men talking about a cyclops who had supposedly been captured by a holy swordswoman, and this immediately caught his attention. According to legends, an extremely powerful aura can be felt from the dungeon, and rumors stubbornly claim that a new boss has appeared there. This news surprised him so much that Arenheier even considered traveling to that city to see everything with his own eyes. In honor of the holiday, a grand fireworks display was launched, which all residents of the city could see, and the sky sparkled with bright colors. Astrea also watched the salute, and with a slight smile, noted that the Lord must have spent a fortune on it. Meanwhile, Ehrenheir was also watching the fireworks, but his thoughts were far away, contemplating the emergence of a new boss. A few days later, the boy finally informed his mentor that he intended to go on a dangerous hunt with Hex. Astrea, knowing how tense their relationship was, even thought she just heard it. Seeing the boy finally come, Hex asked in surprise how Astrea was able to let him go. Sigrian remembered how happy and relieved he was to be released, not even trying to hide his true emotions. Thinking that she would refuse him at least once, he decided to lie and say that she reluctantly agreed to let him go. However, this did not reassure Hex at all, because it was the boy's first time hunting, and it was unclear whether he would be able to cope. Cian was determined, wanting to prove not only to others, but also to himself that he could overcome this challenge. Meanwhile, the girl went outside and made sure that the boys had indeed gone hunting without looking back. She decided not to waste any time and began training, immersing herself in deep spiritual meditation. Through meditation, she gradually got rid of unnecessary thoughts and feelings, cleansing her heart of everything superfluous. In addition, Astrea achieved inner peace and learned to maintain balance even in the most difficult situations. Such training was mandatory for anyone who sought to obtain a spiritual sword and grasp its power. But like every person, she had her weaknesses and fears that reminded her of themselves from time to time. The most painful memories remained those of childhood, which, to put it mildly, was not one of the happiest periods of her life. But thanks to numerous meditations, Astrea learned to calmly cope even with these bitter memories. And right after that, she woke up, realizing how far her training had come this time. After all, Exceeding bodily boundaries and going beyond one's own limits meant that she had accumulated significantly more emotions and memories than ordinary people. But at the same time, these same memories from her past life constantly became an obstacle, preventing her from focusing on her training and moving forward. Memories appeared suddenly, like scavengers prowling in the darkness, attacking at the most unexpected moments. The memories that had been living inside her all this time suddenly spiraled out of control, and something had to be done about it immediately. During training, Astria got a little hungry and asked Cian to bring her some cookies, but after hearing no response, she remembered that he wasn't around. She assumed that the problem might be the location, so she decided to return to where she usually felt calmer. Using teleportation, she instantly moved and immediately immersed herself in training again, wasting no time. Meanwhile, the men had already begun their hunt, and Hex wanted to help the boy, but he confidently refused. However, everything turned out to be not so simple, and when the boy encountered the beasts, he repeatedly heard critical remarks from Hex. Even in the evening, when the boys were already having dinner, the girl continued to meditate, completely immersed in her inner world. Astrea even sat like that all night, not moving and maintaining the same pose, like a statue with extraordinary endurance. Remembering that today was Sheen's return day, she decided to clean up a bit and teleported home. By the time the cleaning was finished, it was already late. But Shin still hadn't returned, and she began to get visibly worried. However, she pushed away the disturbing thoughts, reminding herself that Hex was next to him, and nothing would happen to him. The girl even regretted a little that she hadn't gone with them, but she remembered that it was a rare occasion when Sion had asked her for something. Therefore, she did not want to interfere with the development of his social skills, since he usually spent time only with her. Unable to bear the excitement, Astria finally threw on her cloak and was about to set out in search of them. But as soon as she opened the door, she saw the surprised boys in front of her, who were just returning. They were genuinely curious about where the girl was going at such a late and unsafe hour. In response, she immediately began to scold them, noting that they should be warned about being late, not make others worry. Having expressed everything that had accumulated, she immediately rushed to examine the boy, checking if everything was okay with him, even forgetting about Hex. The guy, assuring her that they were just fighting monsters and nothing serious had happened, added that he had a little surprise for her. Holding out a small box, he wished her a happy birthday, a little awkwardly, as if he was afraid of her reaction. At first, the girl was confused, but then she remembered that today was indeed her birthday, which she had completely forgotten about. And then Astria finally realized that the boy had gone hunting with Hex to prepare a gift for her. Seizing the moment, Hex couldn't help but confirm that this guy was indeed a rare nugget. After all, even when faced with high-level monsters, he was not afraid and acted confidently, as if he had much more experience. On the contrary, Sigrian even used all the magical skills he knew to effectively confront his enemies and not retreat. Having frozen the monster's paws to the ground, he was able to completely immobilize them with a few precise blows of his sword. Hex, of course, knew about his swordsmanship, but even he didn't expect the boy to handle it on his own. While he was watching the boy, he even had the idea of taking him on as a student, and he noted that Astrea had raised him surprisingly well. Noticing Ria's thoughtful expression, he wondered if she was even listening to what he was saying. He soon realized that her absent-mindedness was due to her simply forgetting her own birthday. The embarrassed girl didn't answer, only quietly remarking that she had lived too long to attach importance to it. Cyan objected that it wouldn't work that way, and immediately suggested having a small but heartfelt celebratory dinner. Very soon, Cyan managed to prepare several dishes, and Hex, strangely enough, even helped him without any unnecessary jokes. Watching them work together harmoniously, the girl involuntarily smiled, feeling a warm excitement. Astrea quietly remarked that they didn't need to try so hard for her, but of course no one listened to her. Continuing to argue, the boys told her to just sit down and be quiet, because today it was all exclusively for her. The girl sincerely didn't understand why they were even more excited about her birthday than she was. Although she was a little embarrassed to watch them fuss over her, it was strangely heartwarming at the same time. After all, her birthdays used to be sad, and she most often spent them alone, without any celebrations. At that moment, she realized that having such a loyal friend as Hex and Sion by her side was a true blessing. so she asked Hex to open one of the cabinets and get some wine, deciding to relax a bit with them. Opening the refrigerator, Xian was surprised to see it completely full and began to scold the girl for not eating. But they both didn't expect to hear her answer when she confessed that without him, the food seemed completely tasteless to her. Only after she said that did the girl realize her words and blush, and Hex immediately guessed that she had been lonely all this time. And as soon as he started joking about how sentimental this holy swordswoman was, he immediately received a mild but well-deserved blow. Continuing to joke, he pretended to beg Xian to save him from the girl who was already ready to beat him up. After a while, having had a good time, Hex went home and thanked them for a pleasant evening. As he was saying goodbye, he couldn't help but joke, and added that if she ever got lonely, she could always write to him. The boy, although he was used to Hex, was still a little glad when he left, because he hadn't been alone with Rhea in a long time. Tired from a busy day, Astria was about to go to bed and thanked the guy for the delicious dinner. But Xian only cared about one thing: whether she was finally going to open his gift. Hearing this, the girl suddenly realized that she had completely forgotten about him amidst all the events of that evening. Opening the box, she saw an elegant hairpin and earrings with rare stones, which immediately caught her attention. Coming closer, the guy remembered with a smile that he had heard her complain more than once that her hair was constantly in the way. Carefully putting the earring on her, he promised that he would remind her of her birthday every year so that she would never forget again. Looking at the earrings that already adorned her, the boy noted with satisfaction that they looked even better than he had expected. Astria was incredibly pleased, but deep down, she understood that the most valuable gift was his appearance in her life. Thanking him for the gift, she promised that she would definitely wear it with pleasure and cherish it as something special. As they were about to go to bed, they said a warm goodbye, wishing each other a good night and sweet dreams. Grabbing his heart, Xian suddenly realized that if they spent any more time together, it could become dangerous. His heart was beating so loudly that it felt as if it was about to give away all his true feelings without any chance of hiding them. He himself couldn't understand at what point he started looking at her with such a warm and at the same time anxious look. At first, Astrea just took care of him, gently stroking his hair, although he sometimes didn't like it very much. But despite this, he was happy with her, even if he didn't always dare to openly show his true emotions. He was happy because he was no longer alone. But after a while, being next to Rhea began to torment him in a strange way. He remembered how she had treated him after a walk with wet hair, grumbling a little, but still caring. Every touch of hers resonated in his heart, with a slight tremor that became stronger and more intrusive. And soon, this awe grew into a desire to be as close to Rhea as possible, and later, into something akin to greed. Sigrian was constantly worried about her, and always tried to take care of her comfort, even in small things. The girl was happy that that little boy had grown into a reliable man who genuinely cared about others. Her praise again and again made him feel embarrassed and blush, like a teenager who wasn't used to such words. And yet, Xian tried many times to suppress his feelings, convincing himself that this would be the right thing to do. After all, Astria was his benefactor. She sheltered him like a wild beast, and he even began to despise himself for such feelings. But his determination didn't last long, as he couldn't live a day without her, no matter how hard he tried. And the more he tried to distance himself, the more clearly he understood that he didn't want to lose her by his side at all. Eventually, Sigrian decided for himself that he would no longer run from these feelings and would accept them as they were. After all, after a long internal struggle, he finally admitted to himself that he was truly in love with her. But his desire was too little, and that very night, when he lost control, the evil god within him watched indignantly. He found it impossible that a creature like him could truly love a human. In reality, he craved Astria's ether to restore his strength, and wanted to make the girl his slave, not his lover. That was why he was furious that his human incarnation could even feel something so weak and contradictory. But eventually, Cassian accepted this as a fact, and decided that the only way out was to get rid of the source of these unwanted feelings. Without hesitation, he immediately headed for her room, determined to see the matter through. The girl, who was still awake and just getting ready for bed, didn't understand what exactly had changed in his behavior. Seeing her beauty, the boy was momentarily confused and forgot why he had come, not knowing how to explain his appearance. And the girl, as if nothing had happened, noticed that he had arrived on time, and asked him what he thought about the dress and earrings. Recalling the purpose of his visit, Cashin coldly replied that neither the dress nor the earrings suited her at all. Finally, as he was about to go to bed, he said he would ignore his words and said goodbye, leaving the girl confused. After leaving the room, the boy immediately leaned against the door, trying to understand what exactly had just happened. The image of the girl could not be erased from his mind, and it kept coming back again and again. Only now did he realize the seriousness of his situation and his inner turmoil. He was convinced that this woman had done something to him, because, in his opinion, he was incapable of feeling feelings. The next morning, when he woke up, Sion couldn't remember when exactly he had fallen asleep and changed his clothes. But more importantly, as soon as he got out of bed, he felt an unbearable pain in his body, as if he had been tense all night. The girl, who had already woken up, carefully observed his behavior, and he, as always, addressed her politely. She even had the thought that last night it wasn't Sion in front of her at all, but someone else. Although he sometimes behaved capriciously, it still did not fit his usual behavior. Astrea began to recall their conversations, in which the boy repeatedly emphasized that he had long since ceased to be a child. What convinced her even more was that he asked about her hairpin again, even though yesterday he had said it didn't suit her. The girl drew her own conclusions from his behavior and decided to openly share them with the guy. Getting as close to him as possible, Astrea began jokingly flirting and asking how he could have deceived her for so long. The guy went through a lot of guesses in his head and feared the worst, that she would find out about his feelings for her. But to his surprise, she suddenly wondered who this mysterious person was. Analyzing his behavior, she assumed that he had a girlfriend with whom he was secretly dating. On the one hand, the guy was glad that she hadn't guessed anything about his feelings, but on the other hand, he was stunned by her conclusions. While Sigrian didn't know how to react, she explained that she had noticed him growing up. He listened wearily to her words about how she supposedly understood his feelings, even though she was already 100 years old. In the end, without going into details, he assured that it was a false assumption and he had no one. This surprised her even more, because Astrea wanted to know what exactly he was hiding from her. When he heard the new suggestion that he might have been abandoned, he almost tripped on the stairs. While she reassured him that this girl probably just had no taste, he was amazed at her confidence, so he decided to carefully find out where she got such thoughts about his possible love. Smiling, Astrea recalled that she had always been there and had carefully noticed the slightest changes in him. Continuing to insist that that imaginary girl had no taste, she didn't notice how the boy calmed down. To change the subject, Sion asked her to bring a ribbon so he could tie her hair neatly. In the evening, looking at the hairstyle that was still holding up, she admitted that he was quite skilled at styling his hair. Turning around, she immediately noticed the cat that Sion had once given her, and she couldn't help but smile. She had only now noticed how intently the doll was looking at her, and that look sometimes reminded her of Xian. Taking him in her arms, she realized that she would have to sleep with him so as not to feel lonely. Astrea remembered the moment when Sion, along with the other children, competed to win this kitten for her. It was such an unexpected gift that she decided to name him Choo Choo. Remembering that this was not an easy name for her, the girl put the toy away because she still had things to do. As she took out the jewelry box, she remembered telling the boys that she liked the gift. But the problem wasn't with the earrings, but with the core of the agrafex, or rather with the stone that was difficult to get. She really liked this particular stone, because with its help, she planned to absorb unpleasant childhood memories. After all, agrafex was a monster that fed on the black ether of humans. However, the longer the memories remain in him, the more distorted and worse they become. In addition, the nuclei have a side effect. When memories return to a person, it can become deadly. Even now, the risk is so great that if she doesn't return to them for a long time, it could eventually kill her. Memories of her past life constantly prevented her from understanding the essence of the Sword of Reason, so she sealed them away. So she only has 100 days to master the Sword of the Mind, which is a rather complex technique. Astrea considered this a last resort and planned to use it only in case of real necessity. Tired of her experiences, the girl did not notice how she fell asleep, and again she began to have nightmares. The evil god, who had re-entered her room, knew that the demons were continuing to torment her. Unexpectedly for himself, He ordered the demons to disappear, and they silently dispersed. He felt his strength gradually returning to him, but at the same time, he understood that it was not enough yet. He decided that if he ate something tonight, he would be able to fully restore his energy reserves. Meanwhile, the girl continued to have nightmares, from which she even began to cry quietly. Cassian was annoyed by her tears, but despite this, he decided to ease her pain and lay down next to her. In her dream, the girl suddenly remembered one of the most painful days of her life. This happened around the third grade of elementary school, when everything seemed simpler. She was happy to see the beautiful toys on her friends' backpacks, but her parents weren't planning on buying them, so she made the wrong move and tried to steal her father's wallet. The punishment for this turned out to be too harsh and painful for her. Her father tore her toy into pieces, not understanding why she had taken the money to buy this nonsense. She also named this toy Choo Choo, and her childish greed was ruthlessly trampled upon. But this was just the beginning. The father sought to severely punish his daughter for her act, but unexpectedly, an unknown person appeared in her memories, forcing the man to swing his weapon and hit the girl. None of them understood what kind of man he was, and he wasn't even in the girl's real memories. It was too noisy for the man to be there, so he and the girl moved to a quieter place. While the girl looked around, trying to understand where she was, time seemed to stand still around her. The man didn't understand why there was so much fuss over a toy that he was calmly sewing together. After making sure that everything was fine with her toy, she thanked her husband, calling him her little brother. As he was about to leave, he ordered her not to cry over trifles anymore, albeit in a softer tone. The little girl grabbed him by his clothes and asked what his name was. The man was reluctant to answer at first, but eventually introduced himself as Cassian, the name of the evil god. In the morning, the sleepy boy woke up and, before he could even open his eyes, was already thinking about breakfast. Suddenly, Cian saw a girl in front of him and was confused, not understanding what she was doing in his room. Looking around, he realized that it was him in her room. But the question remained the same, that he had forgotten here. He decided to think about it later, as it would be awkward if the girl caught him here, so he hurried out. Hugging the toy, the girl continued to have a dream in which she sincerely thanked Cian. As soon as he walked out the door, he breathed a sigh of relief, glad he hadn't woken her up. As always, his heart was pounding so hard next to her that it felt like it was about to jump out of his chest. Again, unable to remember when he had changed clothes, he felt a sense of déjà vu and assumed he was suffering from sleepwalking. After all, he often remembered waking up in her room, although sometimes he remembered falling asleep in his own. Besides, every time he woke up next to her, he unconsciously held her hand. Sigrian realized that if this continued, he would simply not be able to look her straight in the eye. Meanwhile, the girl soon had to wake up too, but not of her own free will, because someone was persistently trying to reach her and was annoyingly disturbing her sleep. Annoyed by the awakening, Astria was eager to know who had dared to wake her. She immediately recognized Hex's voice, who sarcastically asked if she was awake yet. After mocking her a little, the man got down to business and reminded her of her request. She recalled that during one of the dinners, she asked to tell Arenheimer's father that she agreed to teach him. Hex reported that she had agreed to take him on as her apprentice, although the father looked happy as if he had finally gotten rid of his son. He also admitted that there was another problem that the girl was very eager to find out about as soon as possible. Hearing this, her face changed noticeably. She didn't want to believe such news. Meanwhile, Arenheimer had already woken up and was calmly eating breakfast, unaware of any new troubles. His subordinates were already begging him to return home, as they had searched all the dungeons and found no one where the Cyclops had been before. As soon as one of them reported that a response had been received from the Holy Swordswoman, who agreed to take him on as a disciple, he abruptly refused. After all, he was not used to giving up and abandoning what he had started halfway, even if it was difficult. Arenheimer was to become the next Holy Swordsman, and no matter how many compliments he was given, he was confident in his own superiority. Observing his strange behavior, his subordinates decided to ask what exactly he was doing now. Without being distracted from his thoughts, the boy replied that he was thinking, although he did it in a rather unusual way. Throughout his life, he was taught fencing by many masters, but over time they became too weak for him. Therefore, ordinary things did not interest him, but the news about the place being taken by the new boss interested him. According to eyewitnesses, a powerful aura was emanating from the dungeon, and there were rumors that a new owner had appeared there. Arnheier believed that studying under the Holy Swordswoman would be an extremely boring ordeal for him. That's why he decided to run away from everyone and explore the dungeons first, considering it more important. His subordinates were already tired of this way of life and did not share his views, considering the Holy Swordswoman to be much more important. However, they had no right to argue with him, so they were forced to silently follow orders. Meanwhile, Sion, as always, had already started preparing breakfast. During breakfast, the girl decided to inform him that another student would soon join her. This news frightened him, so Sigrian immediately began asking clarifying questions. The girl behaved calmly and explained that she didn't know when he would show up because they were currently looking for him. Hearing this, she was momentarily speechless, but quickly calmed down, hoping that he would return. However, this was not the only news she wanted to share. She also wanted to tell him about his true nature. According to the original, he was a magnetic man, intelligent, attractive, to whom everyone was involuntarily drawn. Sion was uncomfortable hearing about someone else appearing nearby, but he held back and didn't react, even though he didn't plan on being friends with the stranger. After that, an argument arose between them, which almost turned into a real fight. Astria understood that this news would upset him, but she did not expect such a strong reaction. Afterwards, she went back to the dungeon for training, serious in her mind. As soon as she moved, she immediately encountered several monsters. The girl remembered that after defeating the monster, she automatically becomes the new boss of this place. She had a feeling that today's training would go well, and she would take a step towards understanding the sword of the mind. In this place, she felt light and pure, as if all her disturbing thoughts had disappeared by themselves. Astria believed that today she would be able to come closer to mastering the Sword of Reason. However, she soon realized that she might have been wrong when she heard a very unpleasant sound. Turning around, she saw a strange man who was already preparing to attack the ogre. Arnheier was glad that he had finally found the dungeon and was going to destroy all living things around. However, as the guardian of this place, the ogre tried his best to protect it from the threat. Arnheier was confident in his abilities and victory, until his sword was blocked. When the dust slowly cleared, he saw a girl in front of the monster who had repelled his blow. Looking at her beauty, as if she were not of this world, he momentarily forgot about everything around him. While Astria calmed the ogre, the man couldn't understand what she was doing in such a place. After treating his wounds, she asked him to rest while she dealt with the situation herself. And finally, Arnheier guessed that she was the new boss of the dungeon, about whom there were rumors. After learning the truth, he became even more determined to destroy all monsters without exception. But this time, the same mysterious girl stood in his way again. The man didn't even have time to repel her attack because he couldn't see how she was moving. Believing that he was wounded, the man began to look for a potion so as not to die from his imaginary wounds. After making sure that there were no injuries, the boy heard an explanation about the various creatures of this world. Holding the sword in her hands, she noticed that the monsters only attack those who enter their territory. Astrea added that you shouldn't judge good or evil by appearance, because even an ugly seed can grow into a beautiful plant. Only now did Arnheier realize that she had attacked him with her sword still in its armor. Hearing her words as advice from an elder, he wondered who she really was. Since childhood, he was told that all monsters should be destroyed, even if they seem beautiful. Later, the guy realized again that he was just staring at her mindlessly, without looking away. Arnheier had heard that some monsters could take on human form, so he began to accuse her of treachery. Considering the monsters to be an absolute evil that must disappear, he raised his sword again to attack. Seeing his indecision, she said that if so, then let him try to overcome her by force. When she calmly threw her sword to the ground, he suspected another trap on her part. Later, the situation even became funny, as the man stood motionless with a sword in his hands and remained silent. Justifying his actions, he stated that she had provoked him and launched an attack again. He expected another victory, but he had no idea that overconfidence would play a cruel joke on him. Although he had the best fencing masters, the girl's experience far exceeded even his years. He began to lose consciousness, and Astria, turning to her friends, called for revenge on the attacker. Before finally falling to the ground, the man realized that this fight was his last. Unexpectedly for himself, he woke up alive and, one might say, almost unharmed. Looking around, he saw that he had been covered with a blanket and his sword lay next to him. Soon, the same girl with the broom, whom he had considered a monster, appeared before him. Not understanding why she was laughing, the boy looked at his reflection in the bucket of water. His indignation knew no bounds when he saw what the monster's revenge looked like. Arnheier began to accuse the girl, speaking rudely, but she ordered him to be polite. Pointing to the monsters, she noted that it was they who had all brought order and order together. But the boy ignored it, surprised that the monsters were cleaning up, something he had never heard of before. Moreover, he noticed that they not only cleaned, but also seemed to enjoy it. Turning to him, she said he got what he deserved and beat him well with a broom. Suddenly, he noticed the imperial family crest on her sword, which caught his attention. Arnheier knew well that the emperor bestowed such swords only on those who had accomplished outstanding feats. And in the end, he realized that he was not a monster at all, but an ordinary person. A whirlwind of questions arose in his head, why she was acting like a boss, and for what feat she had received that coat of arms. Remembering how foolishly he had behaved, he felt ashamed of his own mistakes and prejudices. Astria also noticed his stubbornness and, taking a rag, wiped his face, deciding to spare him. She added that, judging by his abilities, he had probably been experiencing inner apathy for a long time. She noted that even if so, he should not abuse power or humiliate the weaker. Arnheier himself understood the truth of her words, for he had been raised in prosperity and accustomed to praise. Therefore, he no longer felt joy from either victories or defeats, but simply drifted with the flow of fate. Although his life seemed successful, deep down he suffered from apathy and emptiness. Meanwhile, the smiling girl finally wiped his face, completing the tedious job. She wondered if he would be able to get home on his own, without help. She was going to give him a healing potion and advised him to leave before sunset. But the boy suddenly grabbed her hand and quietly said that he couldn't go alone. Taking her hand, Arnheier immediately felt a strange desire not to let go. It seemed to him that if they parted now, they would never meet again. Astria carefully released his hand and gave him a teleportation whistle to get back faster. She decided to finally ask his name, because until now she had been talking to him without proper introduction. Upon learning that his name was Arnheier, she calmly accepted the name and introduced herself in return. The next moment, she completely understood who exactly was standing in front of her. She remembered that in the book he was described as a boy with purple eyes and golden hair. Therefore, she did not immediately recognize him and could not believe that it was the same young man. Eventually, she realized that his appearance and abilities were not so ordinary after all. She tried to deflect the blame, suggesting that her eyes were glazed over by Xian's beauty. But the guy was interested in how Astria learned his nickname. Trying to hide that she knew who he was, she said she simply shortened his name and apologized. Getting down on one knee and kissing her hand, he allowed her to call him by that nickname, because he liked it. Remembering the original book, she felt a wave of anxiety suddenly wash over her. After all, according to the plot, the guy, having first met her in battle, was defeated. Usually, fencers take defeat as a blow to their honor, and he even declared that if he defeated her, she should marry him. He trained to reach her level, but eventually lost her to an evil god and dedicated his life to a mission. She had thought his loyalty was wonderful then, but now it concerned her directly. So she tried to reassure herself with the thought that she could still change the course of events. Astria asked why he was without guards, because his parents were probably worried, to which he replied that he had been kicked out of the house. She immediately realized that he was lying because Hex told her how he himself had run away from home. She didn't even need to ask, because she guessed on her own that he had run away, not wanting to learn from her, and she immediately imagined his surprise that he not only refused to study, but also lost to her in battle. Deciding that it was even to her advantage, she wanted to take him home and talk to his father in person, but Arnheier flatly refused to return home, and none of her persuasions had any effect on him. Sighing wearily, she realized once again how difficult it was to get along with teenagers. Meanwhile, Arnheier decided to give it a try and asked if she could take him with her. Astria was going to suggest it herself, so she even felt a little better. The guy, without waiting for consent, immediately took her hands. The girl didn't expect this either, because she thought that after the defeat, he would refuse to study with her. However, she still said that she needed to inform his parents about him living with her. Hearing her words, the guy was already imagining how they would live together, not knowing about another roommate. So he himself hastily said that he should ask his parents' permission first. At that moment, they were both thinking about different things. The guy thought she loved him, and he was worried about his parents' conservatism. On the other hand, the girl did not understand his behavior because his parents themselves begged her to take the boy to their place. Seeing his behavior, Astria involuntarily remembered Cian, who also wanted to go with her. He was willing to do anything to avoid being alone again, and was ready to carry out any of her orders. As she said goodbye to the monsters, she apologized for revealing their whereabouts through her training. After petting the child, she said she would take the necessary measures so that they could all live in safety. When she finally got everything sorted out, she finally asked the guy to go out with her. She asked him to take her hand so they could teleport to her house together. Although Astria had warned about the arrival of a new student, Cian was still, as expected, dissatisfied. However, according to the plot, he was supposed to become a hero who would eventually save the world. As the girl had predicted, their first meeting wasn't very pleasant. The guy immediately started demanding that he had forgotten Xian, and Xian, in turn, asked who he was to be in charge in her house. Watching their argument, Astria realized that it was naive to hope for their peaceful interaction. It was obvious from the beginning that the children chosen by the bright and kind god were unlikely to be compatible. Sensing that there would be many more similar situations, she realized that she should act more carefully. Continuing to argue, Arenheier suddenly exclaimed that he was actually Astria's future husband, although she herself did not know this. Meanwhile, Cian watched Astria argue with Arenheier, who explained what had brought him to learn fencing. Only now did the man find out that this girl was actually his fencing teacher. The girl immediately noticed his strange reaction to her words. Looking at his surprised face, Astria realized that he had no idea who she was. Cian, who already knew of his arrival, looked visibly upset. Arenheier began to blame Astria, stating that he thought she had brought him as a future husband, not a student. He added that he was amazed by this, although the girl herself was even more surprised. After all, everyone who held a sword in their hands wanted to meet and compete with her in person, so she didn't understand how he could not know about her, even despite her recent, less active activities. Tired of explaining, the girl reminded him that she was still a holy swordswoman. Then he remembered the message from Hex, which said that Astria had agreed to take him on as an apprentice. Finally, Arenheier realized everything she had been trying to explain to him all along. It seemed like she would rather die than wait for him to understand everything. Observing the situation, Cian smiled, realizing that this guy posed no threat to him. After all, he considered it absurd to follow one's feelings blindly and at the same time speak so confidently about reciprocity. It was even funny to him to hear him continue to call himself her future husband, as if it were something decided. And he told him that Astria was a holy swordswoman who would never pay any attention to him. Besides, Cian even sincerely considered him much weaker than himself and did not hide it. Seeing that their argument was going too far, Astria tried to calm them down so that they wouldn't start fighting. But it was already too late, and if they could, it seems they would have incinerated each other with just their looks. They decided to compete against each other without even listening to any orders from Ria. Ultimately, realizing that she couldn't convince them, she decided to monitor the fight as an assessment of their skills. Astria realized that this situation was inevitable because she herself had brought two sworn enemies together. In addition, unlike the human world, the world of swordsmen lives by the laws of the jungle, where strength reigns supreme. She understood that she could not prevent this, so all that remained was to carefully monitor the course of events. Suddenly, Arenheier asked the girl if it was allowed to use real swords instead of wooden ones, but the girl, knowing that this would turn the fight into a deadly one, remained steadfast in her decision. She emphasized that they should compete based on fencing, not magical power. While the rivals prepared for the start of the duel, Cian did not miss the opportunity to spend some more time with Ria. And of course, watching this, the man almost burned with jealousy like a hot coal. Later, he realized that Shin's Jinji was deliberately behaving in a way that was meant to upset him and throw him off balance. Arenheier watched carefully as the girl treated him almost like a little boy, with slight concern. He couldn't figure out what exactly she liked about him, if Estrella praised him and gave him advice. Finally, she remembered the presence of Arnheir, who was also impatiently awaiting her advice. However, her advice was harsher. She said he was too self-confident and should rely on vigilance. He couldn't understand why there was such a striking difference in the attitude towards him and Cian. In the end, the girl advised him to be more careful, reminding him of his recent wounds. Her words and warm smile even made the guy's heart feel pleasantly warm. After a few phrases, she said, he almost instantly forgot about his insult. Meanwhile, Cian was already watching them with noticeable zeal, not looking away. Soon they finally began their duel, the tension in the air growing stronger. Arnheir sought to possess Astria, and if he never saw her face again, he was ready to destroy everything around him. Each of them understood that to attract the girl's attention, they needed to defeat their rival. Without wasting a moment, they instantly rushed to the attack, exchanging quick blows. Astria watched both of them closely, analyzing their strengths and mistakes during the fight. In the heat of the match, each of them involuntarily noted how skilled and worthy his opponent was. Cian, although he had lost to Astria, was not going to lose to the guy, trying to attract her attention. Each of them did not give way to the other in a single step and held on confidently until the last. In the end, Cian won, as Arnheir ignored her advice and showed excessive self-confidence. Continuing to watch Cian, he couldn't understand where he got such strength from, since they were the same age. The man even had a wound from the fight and the blow he received. Angered by his words, the man abruptly stood up and began threatening to take his life. But Astria stood in his way, ordering them both to stop immediately. She wasn't interested in their arguments, as she was much more concerned with the outcome of the sparring match, which Cian had won. Arnheir, who had never lost before, was devastated by his second defeat in one day. However, even from the defeat he benefited because the girl decided to treat his wounds. Out of habit, Arnheir began to assure that he would have won and made excuses as to why this had not happened. But Astrea silenced him by pressing the napkin harder against the wound. She remarked that if they had been real swords instead of wooden ones, it wouldn't have gone so easily for him. Arn himself imagined that with a real sword, he could be left without a nose, or even without life. The girl added that he didn't listen to the advice and lost because of his own overconfidence. He sincerely thanked her for the lesson and useful advice. Astrea was surprised when he called her a teacher, because she herself had already forgotten about this role of mentor. She liked it, so she gently stroked his head, while Cian watched jealously nearby. And although Arnheir was worried about the defeat, the girl's sincere smile still warmed his heart. At such moments, his heart beat faster, and he even began to doubt whether he would be able to defeat Astria. Suddenly, he felt someone pour a whole jar of potion on him, preventing him from coming to his senses. It was Cian, who thought it was not worth worrying about a small wound, because the potion was quite enough. Arnheir initially wanted to accept defeat and forget about the incident, but now he changed his mind. So they gathered again to compete with each other, not hiding their rivalry. However, the girl interrupted them, noting that she stopped them not for the sake of fighting, but so that they could study. The boys knelt with their hands raised and listened to her explanation, somewhat guiltily silent. She threatened that if they continued to behave like this, they would receive severe punishment without exception. Even after giving up, they found another reason to argue, attacking each other with words. Unable to bear it, the girl screamed at them so loudly that they froze in fear on the spot. She reminded Arena that Cian was his older brother, so he should treat him with respect. She also reminded Cian that as an older brother, he should be a worthy example for Arn. Cian noted that he had only helped by treating his wound with a potion, so he had done nothing unnecessary. Astrea understood that he didn't like Aaron and asked how long he would continue to treat him as an unwanted guest. Cian noticed again that she was talking to him as if he were a small child, and it annoyed him a little. She ordered Cian to show Aaron to his room while she prepared dinner for everyone. The guy didn't want to do this and only responded with a look. But the girl also silently made it clear that there was no point in arguing. So, although without much enthusiasm, he still ordered Aaron to follow him into the room. Watching them, the girl realized that she herself might have made a somewhat hasty decision. After all, according to the plot, their conflict was inevitable and natural from the very beginning. But even so, they didn't have to bring everything to a deadly fight. And even if their meeting was inevitable, she wanted it to take place in calm conditions, without hostility. However, she was still worried, not knowing if they would be able to understand each other. Meanwhile, Seon escorted the man to the guest room, informing him that he would be living there temporarily. Not wanting to stay in the same room with him, Sheehan said to change clothes and come downstairs later. Aaron was about to say that he liked the clothes, but when he remembered that they might belong to Seon, he quickly changed his mind. Opening the door and seeing Sean standing before him, he realized that he had been waiting for him all this time. Looking at his pants, he was once again convinced that these clothes most likely belonged to him. Even without speaking, they continued to exchange glances. As if trying to outdo each other, Seon told him not to stare, but to simply follow him to show him where the kitchen was located. Aaron, not expecting this, decided to talk to Seon first, although he had planned otherwise. The Bangirl Sal already setgi Demi and prepared everything for dinner. Upon seeing the boys, she immediately noticed that Xian was in a rather gloomy mood. Astria understood that now was not the best time to ask questions, so she decided to postpone it until after dinner. In an effort to build rapport, Aaron praised the food, noting that it looked very appetizing. But imagine his surprise when he found out that Xian had cooked and she had only set the table. After that, he instantly lost the desire to taste any dish, so strong was the effect of surprise. But in the end, hunger overcame his prejudices, even despite his dislike for Sean. Looking at the dishes, he admitted that he would like to taste food prepared by her personally soon. The girl, knowing her culinary abilities, just smiled and advised not to set high expectations. She decided not to reveal all her secrets, understanding that over time the guy would find out everything himself. And even though Ehrenheier already knew who had prepared the dish, he couldn't help but admit that it was truly delicious. Meanwhile, Cyan continued to sit silently with a gloomy expression, not even touching his food. Saying that he had no appetite, he decided to go upstairs and leave the company. The girl, who had noticed from the very beginning that something was wrong with him, wanted to stop him, but she was stopped by Aaron, who did not want her to follow Cyan. She confirmed his words, sincerely not understanding why he was so reluctant to let her go to Sion. Aaron didn't want her to leave and began asking her to stay by his side, at least for a little while. From the outside, it looked quite strange, and the girl didn't understand what exactly he was counting on. After all, in any case, she still planned to go to Sion and find out what was happening to him. He decided to talk to Astria and apologize for not getting along with Sion from the beginning. After listening to her words about the need to improve relations, he promised to do everything possible to avoid conflicts. In exchange, Aaron asked that the girl stay with him for a while at this moment. Astria decided that it wasn't too much of a price to pay for reducing their conflicts and agreed to his condition. Meanwhile, the boy sat alone in his room, thinking that Astrea considered him weak and useless. It seemed to him that she was forcing him to watch her have dinner with Aaron, although it was only his imagination. He recalled a conversation with RN, who admitted that he didn't want to limit himself to the role of a student, and he decided to openly declare that his feelings for Astria were sincere and unchanging. So he said that if his feelings weren't mutual, then it was better for him to move away and not bother him. Cian and Astria loved spending time in the garden, where he was her student and she was his mentor. But suddenly an uninvited guest burst into their peaceful life, disrupting the harmony. And Arenheier immediately began to openly demonstrate his desire to take possession of Astria. This was the complete opposite of Xian, who tried his best to hide his true feelings for Ria. He was scared because he had put a lot of effort into hiding them and gaining the girl's trust. He appreciated every compliment she gave him and every moment he spent with her. And even the place he previously considered his own, he was afraid of losing because of the appearance of Arena. He was terrified by the thought that one day he might become completely unnecessary to her. Lost in these thoughts, Sigrian did not immediately notice the girl asking why he was not having dinner. She was worried about his condition, suggesting that he might be sick. So, even unexpectedly for himself, he replied that he really felt sick. Hearing this, the concerned girl immediately began examining him, asking where exactly he felt the pain. She was taking his temperature and suddenly realized that she shouldn't limit herself to potions, so she planned to go to a healer. Her agitated behavior reassured him, as Cian was convinced that she was still genuinely worried about him. In the end, he assured her that everything was fine with him and asked why she had come, because he thought she would stay with Aaron. However, Astria was no longer sure that he was completely okay, at least considering his strange behavior. She kept her promise to Aaron, but spent only a few brief seconds with him, almost imperceptible. Of course, she also needs to pay attention to him, because balance in a relationship is important for both of them. Leaning on her shoulder, Cian reminded her that he was no longer a child and could fend for himself. Hugging her, he cautiously asked why she had taken on another student, since the two of them were quite comfortable together. The girl was outraged by his thoughts because he believed that she no longer needed him, and this hurt her. Cian thought he meant nothing to her, which is why she took on a new student. The girl understood that Cian would be upset by her act without warning, but she did not expect such deep anxiety. She remembered that his childhood fear of being abandoned never went away, only lurked quietly inside. Taking his hands, she sincerely apologized for bringing a new student to them without warning. But did she know that he was not indifferent to her at all, and that his feelings were more important to her than she seemed? She explained that she brought Aaron for another reason, and assured him again that no one would ever replace him in her heart. Unlike the girl, Cian wasn't so sure of her words, because formally, they weren't even relatives. Touching his face with her hand, she confirmed that they were not related, but for her, he had long become family. She added that he is the only person in the world she truly values more than anyone else. He needed these words, so he hugged her tightly, admitting that he also couldn't imagine life without her. Continuing to hug her tightly, he quietly confessed that he had long loved her with all his heart. The boy's words reminded the girl of a similar situation from the past, which left mixed feelings behind. Then, at that moment, she hesitated for a long time with her answer, unable to find the right words. After all, Astria could not get rid of the thought that this child could one day become the cause of her death. As soon as she brought Cian, she swore to herself to get rid of him as soon as his power became dangerous. She was confident in her decision, but the guy's concern for her created doubts within her every day. As she hugged him, she suddenly felt a strange and even slightly funny irony in it. Cian gently called her name, brought her joy, and reminded her of the family she had never really had. She decided long ago that no matter who he became in the future, he would always remain family to her. Therefore, Astria could not do anything to Cian that could harm him in any way. Meanwhile, Cian tried to convince himself that he was awake and had actually heard the girl say that she loved him too. Cian understood that the girl's feelings were not the same as his, but it was the first time she had expressed them so directly. Recently, he remembered how she suddenly became angry with him and looked at him with an icy gaze. And that was the first time it scared him, because she didn't even act like that when he insulted Hex. She was angry at the guy she was seeing for the first time in her life, and it surprised him. Therefore, Sigrian decided to frankly ask her about the reason for such a reaction. As always, despite his age, his main question remained the same. Would she leave him? He knew that Astria cherished him, but he still couldn't shake the feeling that she would leave him someday. In addition, he was disturbed by the words of Aaron, who declared his sincere feelings for the girl. He wasn't going to give up on Rhea, no matter what the man said, but he still wanted to make sure. The girl already knew that Cian wouldn't calm down, but she didn't understand why he still asked the same questions. It seemed a little naive to her, but cute at the same time, so she barely held back her laughter. As always, she promised Xian that she would never leave him, bringing a genuine smile to his face. To make sure, the guy asked her several times if she was really telling the truth. Having convinced himself of this, he decided to carefully shift the conversation to the topic of the wedding. Astria herself didn't understand why the conversation suddenly turned to the wedding, but she remembered a similar situation from the past and realized that Xian was worried about her getting closer to Hex. Remembering how Aaron had called her his bride today, she realized his fear that she would get married and forget about Sheen. In that case, she understood that he needed to explain everything clearly and calmly. Patting him on the head, she said that she had no thoughts of marriage at the moment. On the one hand, this calmed the guy down, because Arena's words had lost their meaning, but on the other hand, it left him no chance. So he decided to clarify whether she even had any thoughts on relationships in general. Astria, although she had never been in a relationship, replied that as soon as she met someone she loved, she would definitely think about it. Throughout her life, she met men who either sought to conquer her or treated her as a trophy. Therefore, her faith in romance had long since faded, and she no longer hoped to find true love. At the same time, she decided to give him a clear hint that even if she did fall in love with someone, it definitely wouldn't be Aaron. She said that if he ever talks about marriage again, he should remember that women like modest men who can cook deliciously. These words calmed the boy down a bit, although he couldn't help but notice that she had partly helped him understand something important. And he concluded that she liked men who were like him. The girl said this to cheer him up, but he was so happy that he even started joking with her a little. So, like a child, she grabbed his cheeks and began to scold him gently but sternly. And she noticed that communicating with Hex was negatively affecting his behavior. Meanwhile, the elf with long ears sensed that one girl was in danger, so he decided to go to her to check if this was really the case. The very next morning, Aaron and the girl met and asked each other how things were going. But Estrella couldn't help but notice that the guy was looking at her too closely. Although she felt it, she didn't want to believe it, but the guy confessed his love to her. In the original, he was portrayed as a hero who dedicated himself to a mission and defeated universal evil. However, later his behavior became intrusive, and at every opportunity, he reminded her that he loved her. Sometimes his feelings even resembled obsession, which greatly stressed the girl. And although Aaron appeared on only 40 pages, he confessed his love more than 20 times. Therefore, she decided to immediately clarify the situation between them. She frankly said that she saw him only as her student and no one else. But he didn't care about her words, because Arenheier said that in the future he would do everything he could to make her see more in him. The girl understood that the situation was not easy, because his eyes really looked a little crazy, and she already realized that it was probably too late to try to convince him. Meanwhile, Cian was no longer so concerned about Irina's actions and simply ignored his presence. He saved the girl from an awkward situation by saying that he had already prepared food for her. As soon as she had the opportunity to escape, Astria immediately took advantage of it. Arn was outraged by Xian's behavior and noted that they were actually talking, and he interrupted them. But Xian didn't care, because he had nothing to do with their conversation. Entering the kitchen, Aaron saw Xian preparing to feed the girl himself. However, at the last moment, he ran up and, instead of the girl, Sigrian accidentally fed Aaron himself. Xian even dropped his spoon in surprise, while Aaron began to criticize the dish, noting the lack of salt. Arenheier explained his action by saying that he was too hungry. The girl was once again convinced that making them friends would not be easy and would take a lot of time. A minute later, Xian turned to Aaron and said that he had to wash the dishes. The girl confirmed his words, noting that in her house everyone is equal. Aaron, having an aristocratic background, did not understand why he could not simply hire a servant. Astria didn't judge him, because at his age, she thought the same way. Instead, Xian explained to him that it was not a matter of giving up privileges, but of realizing himself as a student of a fencing master. And he added that only by giving up arrogance and studying diligently could he achieve mastery in fencing. The girl confirmed his words, noting that Xian was right and ordered Irina not to shy away from household chores. Immediately after breakfast, so that Arenheier wouldn't make anything up, the boy put the dishes in front of him to wash. The girl still hoped that, despite their arguments, sooner or later they would find common ground. However, even after 2 weeks, the situation had not changed significantly. While reading the book, Xian noticed that Aaron was bad at washing dishes and constantly had to redo everything. Watching this, the girl was forced to take back her words about the boy's quick understanding. Sometimes she was even afraid to intervene in their arguments, fearing that it might turn into problems for her as well. Suddenly, she felt a slight vibration from the spatial pocket. After taking out the bullet, she immediately answered the call, wanting to know who was calling. The conversation caught the attention of both boys, and they even forgot about their argument. Astria was sincerely happy to meet her interlocutor and smiled sweetly during the conversation. They looked at each other in surprise, as if trying to understand what was happening. Continuing to watch, they noticed how the girl's expression changed dramatically. She was genuinely shocked by the news that her friend was going to visit her. After finishing the conversation, Astria began to respond to the boys and finally remembered their presence. The girl decided to ignore their question and move the conversation forward, offering Irina help with the dishes. Aaron was happy about this news because it meant he would be able to spend more time with her. However, as it turned out, not everything was so perfect, because Xian offered to teach the boy some housework himself. He explained this by his desire to reconcile with RN and spend more time with him, which was beneficial for the girl as well. Only Arena didn't like this situation because it was ruining his own plans. Cian whispered something quietly in Arn's ear so that only he could hear. Before the girl could ask anything, Cian said she could count on him and could go about her business. She wondered what exactly he had said to Arn, but she decided that maybe they would actually start to find common ground. Besides, she had a lot to do, so she needed to prepare for her friend's arrival. Meanwhile, Sion set himself the goal of teaching Aaron real farming skills. The reason Aaron obeyed him was because he had broken a vase a few minutes ago. Arnheier understood that it was a precious thing for her, because it was a gift from a close friend. However, Sion suggested that he keep it a secret. But in exchange for this, Aaron had to follow all his orders. Continuing to do his household chores, the man could not understand how he had fallen into such a strange and insidious trap. But Sion kept his word, and as soon as the girl asked about the vase, he calmly replied that he had hidden it in the closet, as he had promised. Therefore, Arenheier also respected his promise, and, although he did not want to, was forced to do various household chores all day without rest. Despite the considerable amount of work he had done, he felt quite fresh, and was even surprised by his own stamina. Just as he was about to take a break, he immediately saw Sion walking with a pile of dirty laundry, as if this was his next mission. He decided to remind Sion of his promise to teach him housework, but was told in response that dinner needed to be prepared first, and there was no point in arguing. Continuing to be angry with him, he mentally decided that as soon as he married his mentor, she would definitely kick him out of here without any further explanation. But until Aaron became her husband, he had to conscientiously fulfill all the assigned household duties, even if it didn't bring joy. Suddenly, he noticed a girl in front of him, who calmly remarked that some of the tasks could be skipped, and this surprised him a little. Taking the basket of dirty clothes from his hands, she said she would deal with it herself, and asked him to bring her some fresh flowers. Some time later, after bringing flowers, he heard the girl ask Sion to cook dinner without meat, which seemed unusual to him. Sion also became curious about why she chose such dishes, because she usually prefers meat and does not limit her diet. Embarrassed by his question, she quietly explained that a very important guest was expected today, who was a vegetarian. Finally, after finishing the conversation, she asked for dessert, leaving the boys in a slight state of surprise, and even Arena almost dropped the flowers from his hands. He decided to ask Shin if he knew who this guest was, and if it was the same person the girl had recently spoken to. Sion, who himself would like to know the answer, asked why he was interested in this at all and where he got such a suspicion from. Arn noticed that, despite finding only one weakness in him, he behaved too rudely and sometimes even defiantly. Their conversation was interrupted by Astria, who carefully looked through the entire closet, but still couldn't find the vase she needed, which worried her. The frightened boys stood in silence, while Cian tried to quickly think of what to say to her about the vase to avoid trouble. Arn was already prepared for the worst and believed that Cian would definitely tell everything, after which the girl would become very angry with him. However, he couldn't hide his surprise when he heard that Cian took all the blame and didn't reveal it to the girl. He sincerely didn't understand why he lied, because if he were in his place, he would have taken the chance to justify himself and earn the girl's favor. And although it seemed like just an ordinary vase, the girl was very frightened by its loss and experienced much more than others expected. Seeing her confused face, the guy apologized again, but the girl reassured him, saying that nothing terrible had happened and nothing could be changed. Astrea didn't have time to finish, because everyone suddenly heard a clear knock on the door, which attracted everyone's attention. The girl, eagerly awaiting her friend's arrival, immediately ran to the door, not hiding her excitement. Opening the door, she saw her friend, the elf Felix, who affectionately called her little Rhea and smiled sincerely. They had known each other for over 100 years, as she had once studied with him and knew each other well. She and her mentor were very close, and he knew almost everything that was going on in her life, including the fact that she sometimes suffered from nightmares. Even then, he made it clear to the girl that if she didn't change anything, over time it could seriously affect her condition and even drive her crazy. She recalled how her teacher genuinely cared about her and explained that sleep was a manifestation of a person's subconscious, full of hidden signals. If you often see horrors, dark ether gradually accumulates in the body, which is what happened in her case and affected her well-being. It was at this moment that she first met Felix, who was familiar with her teacher and well aware of her difficult problem. He became the person who put an end to her teacher's anxiety by listening carefully to the situation and helping to find a solution to the problem. The girl listened carefully to his every word and tried not to miss any advice on overcoming her nightmares. Of course, as befits a royal person, he was distinguished by impeccable manners and exquisite beauty, so she could not help but admire him. However, he treated her the same way she treats Xian now, jokingly calling him little and teasing him a bit. Felix knew that the girl had a sincere and pure soul that would never succumb to the influence of the dark ether and would maintain inner balance. Although he rarely appeared in her life, he had a mysterious aura and a cool, balanced energy that was felt around him. Oddly enough, he was her ideal, so he later became her first love in life, leaving a deep mark on her heart. And even after more than 100 years, Felix continued to affectionately call her little, without changing the habit that distinguished him. At such moments, her behavior reminded her a lot of Xian, who also asked not to be called little and reacted to it quite seriously. But Felix noted that, despite her age, she would always remain the little Ria he remembered her as. During their meeting, her students watched them closely with wide eyes, trying not to miss a single detail. Eventually, Felix noticed their presence and quickly guessed that they were her students. Having mentioned this, she introduced Felix as a divine archer to lighten the atmosphere a bit and explain the situation. But seeing that they didn't even move, she hinted that they should greet and show respect to the guest. They seemed not to hear her words and continued to stand motionless, avoiding even a glance in their direction. In the end, they still hesitantly greeted him, realizing that the girl would scold them again for not following the rules of etiquette. Astrea was irritated because she had repeatedly said that in order to socialize, they needed to respect adults and at least say hello when they met. Touching her nose, Felix wondered why she had suddenly become so tense and was acting more reserved than usual. She remembered the time when she had attributed meaning to his friendly actions, and every time her heart trembled with excitement next to him. But when she found out that in Felix's eyes she looked like only a child, she decided to give up her feelings and keep them to herself. Taking her husband by the hand, she finally invited him inside and had dinner, under the astonished gazes of her students. It seemed that if they could, they would burn Felix with just one look. So intense was their reaction. Although the girl tried not to pay much attention to their behavior, Felix couldn't help but notice how unfriendly they were towards him. However, smiling, he turned to the girl and said that her pupils were just as small and yet quite cute. After some time, after a good meal, the man noticed that the dish was really tasty and well prepared. After all, he understood how difficult it was to create such a diverse menu without using meat, while maintaining the taste and balance of the dishes. They behaved like old friends and completely ignored each other's accidental touches, taking them naturally and effortlessly, unlike her students, who closely watched their every move and didn't allow them to even touch each other. It seemed like this was the first time the boys had united, as a new opponent appeared before them, attracting their attention. Noticing their strange behavior, Astrea realized that they didn't like Felix, although they tried not to show it. Felix couldn't stand it anymore and advised the girl to go wash herself off the sauce if her children were so persistent in hinting at it. But these words irritated them even more, and they denied that they were not children, because in 3 years they would become adults. These words were so unexpected for the man that he involuntarily showed his surprise, not hiding his emotions. He noted that for him, they remained children, because they are much younger than he, who is already over 1,000 years old. The girl, who finally returned from the restroom, felt the tense atmosphere between them, and couldn't understand what exactly had happened. Suddenly, Astrea and Felix felt a very familiar energy that seemed like it shouldn't be there at all. In fact, the girl didn't want to admit that the vase that Xian broke was a relic that hid powerful energy. At this time, Jenny's barrier was created around the house, hiding her energy and Xian's energy, but it did not completely protect them from detection. As soon as the vase was destroyed, she immediately sensed that enemies had appeared on the horizon and were approaching. It seemed as if they were deliberately very stubborn enemies who always saw what they started through to the end and did not back down. Not wanting to worry her students, she decided to invite Felix for a walk, Realizing that he was also aware of everything, Felix seemed to have understood her hint, so he didn't object at all to the sudden offer to take a walk together. It seemed that only the boys did not understand what was happening and what was the reason for this behavior. Unlike Xian, Ehrenheier openly wanted to go with them, but Xian restrained him and allowed them to go alone. He felt that the matter was serious, so he asked Ehrenheier to stay and learn how to wash dishes and clear the table. And finally, with a smile, Xian asked them to return as soon as possible, remaining calm and cautious. The girl, of course, did not understand Xian's behavior, but she felt that now was not the time to ask questions and find out details. After all, she remembered well how worried the guy would get every time she left without explanation and left him alone. She remembered his every panicked reaction and fear of being alone again without support nearby. Perhaps the guy sensed the changes in her, but right now she needed to do one important thing without being distracted. And unlike previous times, she decided to reassure him by noting that she would definitely be back for dinner. These were exactly the words Sayan had expected to hear, and the girl understood it from his calm smile. Meanwhile, Felix hinted to her with a look that it was time for them to leave and not delay any longer. When they finally began to leave the house, Arnheyer, making sure they wouldn't be heard, asked why he had let them leave. In response to his reproaches, Xian again reminded him of the help with the vase and made it clear that he should refrain from asking unnecessary questions. Arnheyer didn't immediately understand his hint about the vase, but eventually assumed that he might still be blackmailing him over this situation. Xian briefly said that in the future, let him be his sparring partner when the need or opportunity arises. But he immediately added that next time they would use a real sword, not a wooden one. Meanwhile, Xian couldn't get the expression on Ria's face out of his mind, which remained the same as last time, as if etched in his memory. Namely, the same calm and yet determined expression that he had seen during their first meeting, when she had saved him from the hands of dangerous men. He also remembered her face when men approached her on the street, and this image only increased his anxiety and reflections. So he realized that he could no longer remain a child who constantly needed her protection, and it was time to change himself and become stronger. That's why he wanted to compete with him in a real sword fight, to train his aura, because otherwise he would never be able to develop it. Arn hesitated, because Astria had forbidden them to do so, and he didn't want to upset her or break her trust. But the desire to become stronger eventually overcame his doubts, and the guys still agreed to spar, preparing to test their strength. Watching Xian, Arn understood that, although he looked haughty, there was determination in his eyes, because the idea of the duel was his own. This was explained by his rapid desire to become stronger, so strong that he was even ready to step over his own pride for the sake of the goal. Realizing that he was probably just trying to use him to become stronger, Arn agreed anyway, as he himself had planned to act in a similar way. Meanwhile, Felix and Ria set off on a rather unusual walk, where every step could hide unexpected events and encounters. She felt the familiar energy of the man, but quickly realized that he had come not because of Xian's presence, but for a completely different purpose. After all, usually an evil god skillfully hides his essence, and to be convinced of his nature, you need to see the mark on his back. However, this is only possible with an ability similar to her own, which allows her to see what is hidden from human sight and discern the truth. It was from this that Astria drew the logical conclusion that this person had come here for another reason, unrelated to their previous meeting. As soon as they met, the man noticed that he had heard a lot about her and felt how pure and bright her energy was. Hearing these words, the girl was once again convinced that she was his true target, and cautiously focused on the conversation. Saying that he was pleased to meet you, he introduced himself as a Grand Inquisitor named Lacian, and his tone immediately betrayed self-confidence. He began with a sarcastic remark that he had expected to see only a swordsman, not a great archer alongside him, emphasizing the situation. Felix, without showing fear, ordered him to be silent and to state directly the purpose for which he had come, without wasting time on idle talk. The girl was not surprised by Felix's reaction, because she knew his character well, and understood that there was always a clear reason behind his hostility. These people were from a sect that supported the good god Shiner and checked anyone they thought might be connected to evil. In the past, Felix was an advisor to Azazel, who was a queen but was accused of falling under the spell of an evil god. And on that very day, Her life was cut short by these people, inquisitors from the sect, whom she had once sincerely trusted, not suspecting betrayal. Therefore, she understood well that, having lost his comrade because of them, Felix could not help but feel a deep hatred for this group. Despite such wording, their leader coldly stated that he had no business with him personally and was acting only on his own orders. And before Lazian could finish explaining that he had actually come to the girl, she ordered him to be quiet and speak only to the essence of the matter. It was interesting what he wanted to communicate so important if he dared to enter its territory without permission, ignoring all possible warnings. Realizing that she had a rather sharp tongue, like the thorns of a rose, he decided not to drag out the conversation any longer and to get straight to the point. Lazian explained that the purpose of his visit was at the request of the king, who sought to convey his sincere greetings and respect to the swordmaster. At first, Astria didn't understand what he was talking about, but he explained and reminded her that she had taken in the famous student Aranis. She did not understand how this came to be known, because she had persistently asked the Marquise to keep this information a strict secret. She was aware that the Marquis could not contain his joy and shared the news, so she eventually reached the king himself. Lazian explained that finding her residence was not easy, as it was protected by a powerful barrier, but he eventually managed to overcome it. However, of course, the king's greetings were not the main reason for his visit, as he also sought to convey something more important to her. He handed her an unknown object wrapped in thick cloth, holding it carefully in his hands as if it were something extremely valuable. As soon as the girl saw this object, she immediately guessed what was hidden inside and froze in alarm. Seeing the contents only confirmed her suspicions, making sure that the holy sword bark was in front of her. Everyone knew that the holy sword brought suffering to those whose souls were tainted, and it was created to confront and destroy the evil god. This gift was prepared by the king for the hero who was destined to overcome evil and fulfill his destiny. Although at first glance this sword seemed perfect, in reality it was a dangerous blade that destroyed evil by sucking the life energy of its owner. As a result, Aron would have to sacrifice his own life force to win, so she wasn't going to hand him that sword. But realizing that if the sword fell into the wrong hands, innocent blood would be shed, she decided to keep it with her for a while. However, it didn't end there, and the man strongly advised her to definitely draw the sword and test its action. Felix reminded the impudent man who was in front of him, because even the emperor himself would not dare to speak to her like that, but the girl calmed him down. With her light smile and confident look, Astria made it clear that the situation was completely under her control, and there was no need to worry. She understood that the Inquisitor had asked her to bear the sacred sword for one purpose only, to test her loyalty. With the help of his sword, he sought to find out if she was a servant of dark forces or a hidden threat to the kingdom. Even the man himself and his subordinates were surprised at how powerful, pure, and radiant her sacred aura was. But with every moment she held the sword, she felt it gradually depleting her life energy. This was the trap of the sword. Anyone who uses it even once realizes that their life will never be the same again. After being convinced of her purity, the man began to speak to her much more politely, changing his tone and manner of communication. The girl asked to tell the king not to barge in again without an invitation, to which he replied that he had expected such a reaction and was prepared for it. Felix considered his behavior too impudent, because even the emperor did not allow himself such a tone in communication with them. Felix then suggested that this man was placing church authority above imperial authority, demonstrating his own confidence and influence. Without holding back, Felix remembered that this very inquisitor was in charge of those who had once taken the life of his master, and this angered him. Trying not to escalate the conflict, the man tactfully ignored Felix's question and politely stepped back, ending the conversation. After that, the inquisitor was finally convinced that their mission was complete and walked away, leaving Felix and the girl with a sense of relief. Felix, not knowing what to say next, didn't have time to warn her before the girl calmly declared that she already knew everything and had thought it all out a long time ago. Smiling, Astrea asked him not to worry, assuring him that she had the situation under complete control and knew what she was doing. The man smiled back and noted that if anything happened, she could always turn to him for help without hesitation. Hugging her, he promised that he would always support and protect her and would not allow anyone to harm her in any way. under any circumstances. The girl said she was glad to see him, wished him a safe journey, after which they said goodbye, and the man calmly teleported away. After that, the girl decided to restore order and carefully hid the holy sword in her spacious pocket, taking care of its safety. She wasn't going to give this sword to Aaron, because first she needed to find an item that could reliably hide her aura. Remembering her old friend, a scientist, she decided that she should turn to her for help, because she couldn't find a better specialist. So within a few days, she prepared to set out on her own business, gathering the necessary things and considering her next steps. But the boys didn't seem to even notice her presence, continuing to argue among themselves about trivial matters as if it were the most important thing. Cian reprimanded the boy for arranging things in such a way that the ordinary towel had become almost a rag, losing its appearance. Aaron didn't see a problem with this, because in the end the towel was washed, albeit not in the usual way, but clean enough. Seeing them fighting like a cat and a dog, the girl even mentally noted that this day seemed surprisingly calm. Realizing that lately they had only been fighting over little things, she realized that this was some progress, and soon the guys noticed that she was going to leave. Of course, immediately after that, they began to bombard her with questions, which she calmly and patiently answered one after another. Realizing that their curiosity wouldn't go away on its own, she explained that she had to get one thing, although this only increased their interest. She had previously contacted Jenny and asked for help finding an item that could hide her aura to avoid unwanted attention. However, Jenny could not simply hand it over, so the girl had to independently search for the necessary ingredients to create such an artifact. One of the components was only found in the territory of the elves, who were distrustful of outsiders, which made it much more difficult to obtain. But Astria couldn't wait, because she urgently needed to hide her aura, and she couldn't take the students with her because of their weakness. Therefore, she explained that she would be away for a short time on business, but would definitely return as soon as she completed everything necessary. Finally, she looked at them with a careful look and warned them not to quarrel and to behave carefully. Using the water walking technique, the girl decided to start with lighter ingredients that were easier to find. Arnheier had seen this technique for the first time, so he watched its every movement with admiration and surprise. As soon as the girl disappeared from their sight, the boys immediately exchanged glances, which were filled with competition and determination. They actually didn't intend to fight, but instead decided to simply spar to test their own strength. However, none of them suspected that they were being closely watched from the shadows, remaining unnoticed. It was Jenny who, knowing the girl's whereabouts, had sold her the house and was now watching over her when the landlady was away. She doubted the correctness of her actions, because she understood that if Astria found out that the children were in danger because of her, the consequences would be serious. However, Felix remained adamant and firmly ordered to act as he said, without allowing any deviations from the plan. Since Jenny was skilled in magic, she decided to create a small obstacle for the boys to test their attentiveness and reaction. Through this test, Felix sought to understand whether they were worthy of being next to Astria and being entrusted with important tasks. The guys, having already forgotten about the upcoming sparring match, suddenly noticed a magic circle in the air that radiated strange energy. They had no idea who dared to create the chimera that usually guarded the home of the holy swordswoman herself. They did not understand how this creature could be a monster, because outwardly it did not look at all threatening or scary. But later, both boys realized that appearances are often deceptive and do not always reflect the true essence. The monster could split into many parts, and it seemed to Ehrenheier that most of the attacks were directed against it. Meanwhile, Cian tried to resist somehow, but quickly realized that he would not be able to cope with this creature alone. Arn remembered the words of the girl who praised him for his diligence in doing household chores, and this gave him confidence. He became angry because his blows were making all his work useless, and the yard was becoming extremely dirty again. This anger gave him strength, and he sought even more to destroy the monster, not backing down in the face of difficulties. As before, he was overconfident, believing that with one precise blow he could pierce the monster's core. But at the last moment, the creature, as before, split into several parts, not allowing the boy to even touch it with his sword. In addition, Aaron, after jumping, hit the ground painfully, losing his balance and some control over the situation. But those weren't all the monster's abilities. In addition to teleportation, it completely surrounded Arena, gradually compressing the space around him. He understood that he needed to get out as quickly as possible, otherwise he risked losing consciousness due to lack of air. Unexpectedly for him, Cyan came to his aid, and although he did not fully understand the situation, he immediately rushed into battle. Eventually, the boys came to the conclusion that acting alone, they would not be able to effectively protect the house from this threat. Cyan, like Aaron, understood that ordinary blows would not cause significant damage, so they needed to destroy the monster's core. That is why Xian proposed acting together, temporarily setting aside disputes and focusing on a common struggle. But even when they were united, they couldn't resist light teasing and joking, which slightly relieved the tense atmosphere. With a plan of his own, Xian rushed at the monster first, decisively closing the distance and preparing to attack. He began to strike with his sword, realizing that it would not have much effect, but it would distract the creature. In addition, the monster began to approach him and behaved the same way it had behaved with Aaron before, changing its tactics. According to Sion's plan, one was to attack the core, while the other would cover it and provide reliable protection during the battle. Aaron assumed that Xian had initiated this conversation because he himself wanted to be the first to reach the core and end the battle. However, the boy denied his words, explaining that he would be the one to cover while Aaron tried to get to the monster's core. Therefore, Xian, Manhwa, acting according to plan, deliberately allowed the monster to attack him to divert his attention from Aaron and give him a chance to strike. In the end, through joint efforts, they still managed to destroy the core, after which the monster finally lost its strength and crumbled. The scientist praised them, noting that they did a good job because she had put a lot of effort into creating this guard. However, Felix was not completely satisfied, as he believed that they had barely coped with this slippery opponent and could have done better. Despite everything, they still managed to please him. Those who previously disliked each other suddenly united for a common goal, which was extremely important. But Jenny did not share his opinion, although she decided to tactfully remain silent so as not to escalate the situation and maintain the tense balance between them. Suddenly, Jenny noticed that the ball suddenly began to glow brightly red, as if warning of a danger that no one had yet realized. This color meant anxiety, but the girl did not understand its reasons, because the slug had already been destroyed, and the threat seemed to no longer exist. While watching them, she suddenly noticed someone restoring the slug's power by penetrating the barrier, but she was unable to identify the intruder. It was not easy to get into this place, because she herself created a protective barrier, carefully thought out and almost impenetrable to outsiders. She didn't care who exactly did it, but she wasn't going to let anyone stay here, so she tried to immediately kick the uninvited guest out. To her great surprise, she realized that for some reason her magic was not working, as if an invisible force was deliberately blocking any attempts at intervention. They began to wonder who could have solved the barrier's complex formula, as it required not only knowledge but also extraordinary skill. Felix immediately realized that, besides ordinary magicians, there was another person capable of such a feat, but he did not believe that it could be Astria. The scientist realized that if she couldn't control the barrier remotely, she had to deal with the problem personally, without delay. Already teleporting to the girl's house, she declared that she would try to regain control of the barrier, and Felix didn't even have time to stop her. Meanwhile, Astria, unsuspecting, calmly and confidently obtained the necessary ingredients without being distracted by trifles. It was difficult to obtain the blood of one creature, because this could only happen when it itself sought to return to its true form or through the mirror that the girl used. Now all she had to do was get the most complex ingredient, on which the entire outcome of her dangerous plan depended. Just as she began to ponder her decision, a meteorite suddenly appeared in the sky, rapidly approaching, breaking the silence. But the scariest thing was that he was heading straight for her house, and there was very little time left for reflection. Meanwhile, the boys, who had not yet recovered from their fight with the slug, were forced to re-enter the battle against another monster. And this monster turned out to be much stronger and more dangerous than the previous one, forcing them to act cautiously and in a coordinated manner. He grabbed the swords with his hands, preventing them from attacking, as if toying with their attempts. The monster was about to attack Arena, but at the last moment, Cyan protected him, taking the blow without hesitation. Holding onto his wounded arm, He remembered that he had a teleportation scroll and asked Arena to at least use it to escape and save himself. Despite his difficult relationship with the boy, Aaron was not going to leave the man who had just saved his life, and insisted that he drink the healing potion. Seeing that the boy had fainted, he took his sword and realized that there was no other way but to defeat the Slug King. He was clearly aware that if his attack failed now, the consequences would be fatal for both him and Sion. None of them suspected that while Sion lay unconscious, Cassian had already taken possession of his body, acting cold-bloodedly and cautiously. He decided that it was time to give Arena a little rest, so without hesitation he struck, demonstrating unexpected strength and confidence. Feeling his strength noticeably restored, Cassian realized that he was now able to hide his aura from this insidious hypocrite. Looking at the protective barrier created with mana, he concluded that someone had been experimenting with this system for too long. He understood that right now the good god could not determine his location, but destroying the barrier would reveal his presence and help the enemy find him quickly. Noticing that the magicians were also struggling with this on the outside, he decided to wait for the right moment and use his power in a way that no one would be able to recognize. As he prepared to weaken the divine power, he looked at the monster as if it were a small insect, not hiding his arrogance and cold confidence. Cassian believed that if someone wanted to compete with him, they should first dare to come to him in person rather than act from a distance. Meanwhile, a meteorite was rapidly approaching the house, cutting through the sky with its fiery trail and gaining dangerous speed. Jenny knew that if she couldn't regain control, she would simply break the barrier while Felix tried to calm her down and restrain her. Cassian, using his power, decided to try to stop the situation, intervening cautiously but decisively. Meanwhile, Astria finally arrived at Jenny's with Phoenix, appearing just as the tension reached its peak. She didn't yet know what they had already done and what was happening in her house, so she demanded immediate explanations without unnecessary delay. The girl immediately realized that it was Jenny who had directed the meteorite towards her house, and she did not understand why, suspecting that there were children there. At the same time, she realized that there had to be a good reason for this, because among them, Jenny was the one who understood barriers and their structure best. So they decided to observe her actions for now, until she applied pressure, knowing that this could accelerate the meteorite's fall. Their assumption turned out to be correct, and within a few seconds, a powerful explosion occurred, shaking the surrounding space. Even using pressure, she didn't understand why the barrier still didn't collapse, as if it was being fueled by something else. The thing knew full well that Jenny's magic was fine, but the reason lay in a completely different, deeper, and more dangerous factor. She realized that their opponent was significantly stronger, and this was evident from the black aura enveloping the barrier. Before she could understand what had happened to Sion, she suddenly felt a dark aura turn into a hand that tightly gripped her. Despite the fact that she couldn't even move, the girl calmed Jenny and Phoenix, assuring them that she would help the children if she found herself in such a situation. Astria asked the surprised Jenny and Phoenix to stay put for now so as not to complicate the already tense situation. The girl felt that after she was pulled inside, the space seemed threatening, but now it was strangely filled with warmth and peace. This feeling reminded her of a dream in which an unknown man had saved her and helped fix her favorite toy, leaving a strange mark on her memory. Seeing the body in front of her, she realized that her concern for him was not in vain, because his condition was serious. Although she didn't know that outwardly Sion had lost control, Cassian was now in control of his body. Cassian was an evil god and the fiercest enemy of his bright patron, with whom he was bound by a long-standing and tense enmity. Taking out the sword, she didn't even think that such a parasite could attach itself to her student, and immediately asked what had happened to Sion. Cassian had no intention of attacking her, but had brought news, for it was he who had protected her house from the approaching danger. He also noted that, despite all the circumstances, she had broken her own promise made earlier, and this infuriated him. Pulling the girl to him, he reminded her of the promise she had made 3 years ago to always protect him without exception. Astria corrected him, noting that she had promised to protect not him as an individual, but Sion, whom she considered her student. However, the man was convinced of the opposite, believing that he and the boy were a single whole that could not be separated. He also noted that even the bright god himself shares his opinion. The man explained that the good God was trying to destroy his Sion, and if it weren't for him, the girl's dear disciple would no longer be among the living. The girl was troubled by one question. How does the good God know in which body the reincarnation of the evil God resides? She remembered Zephyr's words that she should be more careful, because the evil God could try to get close to her at any moment. At the same time, she understood that if his words were true, this man could be useful to her. So she decided to ask what he really wanted. He promised to protect Sion's body from Shiner, but in return, she had to keep her promise and not back down from it. Astrea found his words absurd. How could one so arrogantly beg for help without hiding one's own self-confidence? Understanding that he would accumulate strength while she protected him, she still agreed to his proposal, albeit with some doubt. As soon as the evil god finished the negotiations, the black aura began to gradually dissipate, losing its density and pressure. Immediately after that, the evil god left Sion's body, who remained unconscious and unresponsive to the outside world. Therefore, he almost fell on the girl, who managed to catch him in time, preventing the situation from getting worse. While Felix and Jenny rushed to help, the girl was glad that Sion was okay, at least as much as possible. Sitting next to his body, she vowed that she would never allow the evil god to take his body and take complete control. After some time, Sion, who was still unconscious, dreamed of the silhouette of a girl appearing in the hazy light. The guy felt joy when he saw the smile on her face, which seemed to him something very familiar and warm. At the same time, Sion felt deeply unhappy, not understanding the reason for this internal imbalance. He soon woke up and realized that everything he had seen was just a dream that quickly dispelled. But he was even more surprised when he saw Aaron hugging him, softly whispering Ria's name. Under the influence of surprise and irritation, the boy kicked him away, reacting abruptly and without thinking. Aaron, who also didn't understand anything, was genuinely confused and couldn't figure out what was happening around him. Therefore, for him, seeing Xian in front of him was as unexpected as it was for Xian himself. After that, the guys began to wonder where exactly they were, because none of them remembered how they ended up here. Finally, one of them remembered the last moment before he passed out and immediately grabbed Xian by his clothes. Arn remembered that the man, having lost consciousness, had hit him and thereby also disabled him, which was the reason for his loss of consciousness. Xian, who didn't remember it at all, reminded him that he had actually taken the blow while trying to protect him. Seeing the serious expression on his face, Xian realized that he was not lying and was speaking sincerely, without any exaggeration. He had previously repeatedly noticed long-term lapses in his memory, which caused him concern. However, this time the situation did not develop logically, because he lost consciousness from his injuries and did not fall asleep, as had happened before. An even greater surprise for them was the appearance of Hex, which made them both wary and assess the situation more carefully. Xian was more astute and quickly guessed where they were now, comparing the details he knew. Hex, confirming his guess, calmly said that they were indeed in his house. Meanwhile, Felix tried to correct his mistakes by rebuilding the girl's house with his own strength and responsibility. Jenny, like Phoenix, tried in every way to please the girl, before whom they felt guilty and embarrassed. Although they rebuilt the house and cleaned it up, it wasn't enough for the girl to fully atone for their mistake. She had already learned about the tests they had arranged for their students and noticed that their carelessness could have seriously harmed them. Then Phoenix and Jenny, knowing that she was missing several ingredients, offered to personally go in search of them and fix the situation. The girl, realizing how much they had wronged her, even got on her knees, begging for forgiveness and a chance to make things right. Astrea understood well that, although they were to blame for what had happened, they had not caused the most serious harm. She could not forget Cassian's words, according to which it was Shiner who wanted to get rid of Xian at any cost. Moreover, confirming his words, he showed her the traces of the creature that had broken through the barrier, and the girl could not confuse them with anything else. So, rising from the throne that Jenny had created, she said that she had calmed down and forgave them for the mistakes they had made. At the same time, realizing that their cunning plan was not in vain, she decided to ask them what they thought about her students. Felix shared his opinion, noting that the students in some ways resemble her in her youth. In his opinion, Aaron was most similar to her in her youth, especially in his character and behavior. The girl, who knew the guy from a completely different perspective, didn't take it as a compliment and was skeptical of the words. Felix reminded her that in her youth, she had looked down on many people, which made her many enemies, and the girl immediately began to make excuses. Realizing that he would continue to remember her youth, Astria gently hinted that it was time for him to go and not to prolong the conversation. After that, she went to the Hex house herself, feeling sincere anxiety for the children and their condition. As soon as she entered the room where all three of them were, she immediately felt the tense atmosphere that prevailed among those present. Hex noted that to some extent it was all her fault, because of her actions, Felix decided to take revenge on the children. In addition, he noted that the children believe she is angry with them for losing the house. Left alone with them, the girl said that she had already learned everything about what had happened to them and understood their actions. Patting them both on the head, she remarked that they had done well, having been able to defeat the slug monster despite all the difficulties. And, as expected of Aaron Chayer, he immediately decided to take all the glory for the victory, not missing an opportunity to show off. At the same time, he still could not avoid mentioning Sion's participation in this battle, recognizing his contribution. However, he was also going to talk about what Xion did to him at the end of the fight, without withholding any details. But as soon as he tried to voice it, he was interrupted by Xion himself, who assured him that Aaron had dealt with the monster on his own, without any outside help. Looking at his face, Aaron understood without words that he was asking not to reveal the truth to the girl about what really happened between them. Did you like the recap? Want a continuation? Write part 2 in the comments.